Man. Yeah. Man. Yeah, that was the song from David, guys. Yeah. Like I says, that's the romantic homicide song they be talking about. Can y'all hear me out there? Let me know if y'all can hear me out there. That's the romantic homicide song they be talking about. Pretty dark. Pretty dark, you know what I'm saying? Pretty dark song, man. You know what I'm saying? Can y'all hear me out there? Let me know y'all can hear me out there. Type some in the chat, let me know. Some reason it ain't showing up on my end. I see it on YouTube, though. I see a couple of y'all in here. Maybe I need to refresh because it ain't showing y'all comments. Hold on real quick. Yeah, maybe we can get them in here now. I still only see mine. I don't see nobody else's. Hold on. I don't see. Are y'all able to type? Can y'all hear me out there? Let me know if y'all can hear me. Can y'all hear me out there? I see we hear you. Okay, very clear. He looks creepy crazy. Lovely Star, he is creepy crazy. Extraordinarily creepy crazy. Extra creepy crazy. For some reason on my end, y'all, I am not getting the messages where I can pin them to the screen. I wonder what's going on. See, it's always something. It's always something. I can only see what I type. I can't even see what nobody else types. It's like it's not even there. But I can see y'all on the screen, on my other screen. I can't see y'all the way I got it right now. All right. So it's been some new details go on in the David case and in the Nancy Guthrie case, guys. You know, we heard that David was basically arrested. You know, we assuming that he may have got found guilty. I mean, not guilty, but indicted, you know, during while they was questioning people. You know, somebody told on him he got indicted, but I found out that ain't true. He's not indicted. He's only detained. You know what I'm saying? David is only detained. He's not arrested. Check this out.
Singer David, real name David Anthony Burke, has been arrested after 7 months. The 21-year-old was taken into custody by the Los Angeles Police Department on suspicion of murder in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. And police say the arrest happened today with detectives from the LAPD's Robbery and Homicide Division taking Burke into custody. He is now being held without bail. To be clear, I mentioned this before, this is a major break in the case that has been haunting investigators for months. To be clear also, he is innocent until proven guilty. I'll talk about what this all means. But ever since September 2025, when police popped the trunk of a Tesla that was found abandoned in the Hollywood Hills and discovered the dismembered body of teenage runaway Celeste Rivas Hernandez, we have been talking about it. And as the investigation unfolded, there were even more disturbing alleged details emerged, including that parts of her body had been placed in bags inside the vehicle. And since then, there has been intense speculation, all of it centered on the singer named David, that the Tesla was reportedly his, that he and Celeste, who was that they claimed was his underage girlfriend, even though that wasn't confirmed by investigators as of yet. But you had apparent photos of the two together circulating online, raised a lot of questions. And Burke, by the way, hasn't been seen in public since his world tour was abruptly scrapped. Hasn't said a public word about any of this. And
he ain't said it yet, but I'm most definitely show y'all where he basically says he's detained. He's detained, pending, you know, like an indictment. But right now, he's simply detained.
Until now, there has been no arrest. So should we, again, I have to be very clear here. Formal charges have not been filed as of yet. This is despite a grand jury having been impaneled, so it's interesting. And police say the case will be presented to the district attorney on Monday for filing consideration. So tonight, for the big questions, I want to turn right now to missing persons private investigator Steve Fisher and LA Magazine contributor Lauren Conlon. Both have been covering the story since it began. Steve, stand by. Lauren, I want to go to you. You have a few more details about the actual arrest of David, right?
All right, so this is the investigator. We'll get a little bit more into him. He's heated, but now he's finna start talking about the arrest.
Yes, Jesse, we've all been waiting for this day for a very long time. And reportedly, David was arrested at the home he was staying at in Los Angeles. Now, we don't know where that is, but as you said, he has remained silent and out of the public eye for 7 months. So again, the details we have so far are that he hasn't been booked just yet. I did call the jail. They said it usually takes about 5 hours for processing. So we will know a little bit more information as the night goes on, how much his bail is going to be set for, if anything. And as you said, Blair Burke, his attorney, did just issue a statement, which is so interesting.
I'm going to read it. Let me read it real quick.
Yeah.
Here it is. Okay, so this is from his attorneys, Blair Burke, Marilyn Bednarski, and Regina Peter. Let us be clear, the actual evidence in this case will show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and he was not the cause of her death. There has been no indictment returned by any grand jury in this case and no criminal complaint filed. David, has only been detained.
There it is.
Suspicion. We will vigorously defend Rivas Hernandez, and he was not the cause of her death. There has been no indictment returned by any grand jury in this case and no criminal complaint filed. David, has only been detained under suspicion. We will vigorously defend David's innocence. Actually, Steve, I want to start with you now with that. First, your reaction, because if anybody knows you, you have been quite vocal advocating for David's arrest for quite some time. But like they said, just an arrest, no charges yet. Isn't that confusing? Wasn't there a grand jury that was impaneled?
It's really confusing, and I'll tell you, I tweeted about this exact thing before that statement came out. I was surprised that this arrest was by complaint. It was not going to be sent to the DA's office to consider being charged. This is not an indictment of the grand jury. So either the grand jury would fail to an indictment, or for some reason they didn't send it to the grand jury for an actual vote. So either one of those, I'll tell you, it worries me a little bit.
Well, explain to our audience why it worries you. Before you do, let me just read you. This is the statement from the LA County DA's office. Our office is aware of the arrest of David Anthony Burke by the Los Angeles Police Department. The case is expected to be presented to the Major Crimes Division, at which point prosecutors will review the facts and evidence to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to file charges. At this time, additional information is not available. We will share an update on Monday once a filing decision has been made. First, two questions to you, Steve. Were they aware that LAPD was going to arrest him? And two, why does this worry you? You're saying maybe the case is not strong?
I don't know for sure if they were made aware. Normally in circumstances they would be, but I don't know. Is there now a break possibly between LAPD and the DA's office on this case? It could be, because we know that there was a grand jury impaneled. We know that because the filings that the DA's office did in Texas, that was by the DA's office, so they're aware of this case. The fact that they didn't arrest him by indictment, and strategically would make sense that they go for an indictment, I guess, if they want to keep everything really private like they have done. But now it's got to go to a preliminary hearing. So I don't know if there was they couldn't come to terms, and LAPD said,
David is simply detained, guys. Detained.
Listen, we're just gonna throw it out there and arrest him and see if the DA's office picks up charges or not.
Well, look, if you're right, I mean, this could have been just an investigative grand jury gathering evidence, locking in testimony. Maybe they didn't feel they could get a majority of jurors to believe that there was enough probable cause for a charge. Maybe unlikely, because, a grand jury is relatively low standard. But then, like you said, maybe you go to a preliminary hearing in front of a judge, you present the evidence. Lauren, I got to go to you on this. Two parts. One, I mean, you said it, we didn't even know where David was. I didn't even know he was staying in the Hollywood Hills. That was a shocker, what he was doing there. But any response from his family, any response from Neil Langston, who was his apparent friend that was arrested for allegedly not providing testimony, for not testifying in front of the grand jury. He had to be arrested and then actually brought, or reportedly brought to an LAPD, a Los Angeles courtroom to testify. Are we getting any response from third parties here?
So I did just do some digging previously after the news of his arrest. I reached out to the Burke family attorney, Kent Schaefer. I literally just got an email back from him, and this attorney was responsible for filing the writ of habeas corpus, so the family didn't have to testify and travel to Los Angeles. And I said, what do you know about this arrest? And he said, I don't know much more than you. I reached out to Josh Marshall for a statement, his manager. I have not heard back yet. And Neil Langston, I went directly to his Instagram to see if he posted anything. And his Instagram, while it still exists, it's wiped. He completely wiped it.
He wiped it. All those things he had to say. But guess what? I got him.
Every single photo. Previously, he had wiped it of just photos of he and David. Now it's totally gone. So, I mean,
and he was quite vocal on there, Lauren. He relatively recently, Neil Langston posted a bunch of kind of cryptic messages seemingly referring to David.
Yeah, he did. See what I'm saying? I was telling y'all about that the other day. That friend. I feel like the friend is the reason why he locked up right now. He basically spilled the beans.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to
this guy right here, David's friend.
Me at this point that David, nobody wants anything to do with him. I mean, everybody is like, whoa, I'm staying away, or that's what it seems like to me. But I think the big question here is going back to what Steve said. I mean, this arrest reportedly is based on probable cause at this point. So what changed? What piece of evidence came forward now that they didn't have 7 months ago? That's what I'm asking myself.
That's fair. Steve, look, one of the reasons we don't have a lot of questions, a lot of answers, is because the medical examiner's report has been sealed. This was sealed right per the LAPD. I wonder now if there has been an arrest, is that going to be unsealed? Because if you hear his attorney saying he's not the cause of death, what exactly was the cause of death?
So now that he's about these charges are about to be sent up to the DA for consideration, now they'll probably switch their strategy a little bit. And if that's the case, they got something in there that they think points away from David. They're going to want that unsealed, and they're going to have to unseal it anyways now because there's going to be a prelim hearing, assuming he pleads, not guilty. So it's funny. Things are going to really now. An indictment and everything would have
stayed. What's up, barbecue?
And now that's different. So we're about to, if it moves forward, we're about to see a lot, I think, which is healthy, I think, for the case.
Lauren, what about Celeste's family? I don't know if there's ever enough discussion about her family, what they've been going through, what information.
So it's a lot going on. Once again, we find out that David was detained. You know what I'm saying? They didn't even have an indictment after the grand jury hearing. They just detained him anyway.
They have or have not been provided over the last 7 months. Have you hearing anything from them?
Yeah, I mean, my heart breaks for them, Jesse. My heart really does break for them. And initially, it was really her brother that was speaking out to the press. I don't know too much about her mother and father, except I don't think they speak very good English. I think there's a language barrier. So, they haven't really been vocal about this. I know her aunt initially was pretty vocal when she was missing. I saw a lot on Facebook, her cousin as well. But that's really all I know. I'm going to just really, again, stay on top of this as I have been, because I know, Steve, we've been working together on this a lot, and we've just been waiting for this day and for the evidence to come out. I mean, everything has been so secretive, as you said, right down to the medical examiner's report. And one of the first things I did, and even though I knew it probably wouldn't be available, I started refreshing that page again because, I mean, supposedly or reportedly, her cause of death was undetermined at one point because her poor little body was so badly decomposed.
Steve, at one point, this is the last part before I have to
this
go.
Is wild,
Steve,
man.
Remember they said they didn't.
The way he was able to get away with this for so long is crazy.
No, if there was any crime beyond concealment of the body, they couldn't even determine if this was or they didn't even come out publicly and say it was a murder.
Which is baffling because that was never true, because they knew she had been discovered when they came out with that. And that is a mutilation of a corpse, that's a felony in California, not a misdemeanor. So that was an untrue statement. So this is where I'm still very confused about what's going on here.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Obviously, we're going to stay on top of this. We will see what happens Monday and going into next week, how this progresses. I will say it again. He has been arrested. He hasn't been charged. He's innocent until proven guilty. But this is, again, a major development in a case that we've been following very closely here on this program. Steve Fisher, Lauren Conlon, thank you for staying on top of this, and thank you for coming on. I appreciate you both.
So we find out, that basically David was detained, not arrested, right? And remember that friend I was telling y'all about? Let me go over here, because I think I pulled him up. There we go. Yeah, his friend over here I was telling y'all about. Let's go over here. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, we can refresh on what this friend actually went to his social media and said regarding David once he got picked up. You know what I'm saying? They had him testifying in front of the grand jury. And he basically, after he did it, he came out firing shots at David. Get over here.
When Langston was arrested out in Montana at his mom's house,
that friend right here,
Los Angeles warrant for failure to appear as a witness, something we talked about here on Sidebar,
well, that friend,
because he allegedly refused to testify, potentially in the grand jury. We couldn't confirm that for sure, but given his apparent connection to the singer, as documented in photos,
I think this is the person that's telling on him.
But people put two and two together, and they're like, of course he's testifying in front of the grand jury. Of course he was picked up on an out-of-state warrant to bring him back to LA to testify. We didn't know for sure, though. But now that he's reportedly seen going into that building, the courthouse, given the reporting that there is a grand jury that has been hearing evidence in this case for months, now
this is the reason why he got locked up right here. I guarantee it. Watch what I tell y'all. This is my before it even come out theory right here. This is the one that told on him.
Put two and two together again in a very different way. So he's probably testifying, right? I mean, I guess it's also possible he was appearing in connection with the failure to appear charge, but I don't know. I want to talk about that. TMZ also reported that they ran into somebody else walking into the courthouse. LA Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman, who is allegedly the one presenting evidence to this grand jury. Now, she didn't say anything to TMZ as she walked in. But by the way, TMZ reported that back in December, there may have been a conversation in that.
This is what they was talking about when they was talking about their friend
Silverman and an attorney named Evan Jennis. Jennis apparently represents Robert Morgenroth, another David figure. He heads up David's touring company, his manager, who we believe also may have testified in front of the grand jury. And this conversation between Jennis,
I believe these other ones may have testified, but I think that their best friend put the nail in the coffin.
Silverman, per TMZ, was allegedly about, yes, a potentially uncooperative witness. Are we talking Neil Langston? Is everything fitting in here? We don't know for sure, but I mean, the pieces seem to be lining up.
Exactly what
you're
talking about.
Testified
Neil
at a very pivotal moment. And here's the interesting part. If he was testifying in front of the grand jury and presenting evidence against, let's say, hypothetically, David and or anybody else in connection with the death of Celeste or the disposal of her body, wouldn't you think he would testify for a while? Apparently that's not the case. TMZ is reporting that Neil Langston was only in front of that grand jury for 30 to 40 minutes. Again, assuming he did testify.
He told it all.
But that's it, 30 to 40 minutes? What does that mean? I have an idea about what that could mean if it's true. I'm going to talk about it with a former federal prosecutor. We're going to bring him on in a second. But the value of Langston's testimony, what is his alleged role? Let me just hit on that for a second. Again, he was picked up in Montana, arrested at reportedly his mom's house. He was then transferred back here to LA, booked into the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center. He was released on a $60,000 bail. And I go back to what Steve Fisher posted on X about Langston's arrest when it happened. Steve Fisher, we've had him on the program. He's the PI, the private investigator, who was hired by the owner of the property that David was reportedly staying at in LA, possibly near where the Tesla was found. Steve posted the arrest of Neil Langston for failure to appear to give testimony, which are the exact words used by the sheriff's department when speaking with me, concerns me to a certain extent, assuming this arrest
investigator guys
Celeste Rivas Hernandez
trying
case.
to see if they
Targets are not typically called to testify in a case, essentially meaning somebody who could be charged. Had Neo received a target letter, he almost certainly would have retained counsel and invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. That makes me think that he is viewed as a witness rather than someone currently at risk of being charged. Did one person act alone in concealing Celeste's body? If this was a homicide, did a single individual act alone without a conspirator? I find that unlikely. This leads me to believe that Neo may represent a last-ditch effort by prosecutors, a Hail Mary of sorts, because they do not yet have what they need to fully make the case. They may be attempting to pressure him into cooperating, potentially by offering immunity. Is Neo the last hope? And by the way, I go back to what Steve Fisher told me on a recent episode of Sidebar about what he thinks Neo's potential connection to this criminal case is. Take a look.
I'm looking at this whole situation a little bit broader than just the homicide. I understand the homicide is what we're looking for, but Celeste was trafficked, and listen, there's messages back and forth. They knew her age, and so it's not just that. Listen, there's sex crimes against this girl, and there's certain people that knew what was going on. There's certain people that gave rides to her back and forth, even to Lake Elsinore, and so it's not just the homicide for me. I just think that this is one of these things where we got to start standing up for these young girls that are just taken advantage of by these predators. And I hope it's not a situation where it's like, we can't make the homicide, we just can't get there with it and let it go, because there is other crimes, whether it's concealment of the body, whether it's anybody that helped in facilitating her to stay with David. And so it's not just the homicide, it's just everything that happened to Celeste. It's the whole breakdown.
And so while it's been speculated, although not officially confirmed by officials, that David is being considered as a suspect or a target, particularly for homicide charges, we don't know for sure, there has also been talk about whether there is a second suspect too. You have acclaimed criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos spoke on the Two Angry Men podcast back in November that according to people he talked to who are connected to the case, investigators may be looking at a new unidentified second person that was involved, quote, before, during, and after Celeste's death, that they may have digital evidence to support it, cell phone data, social media activity, digital data from the Tesla, that this evidence places this person in the same Hollywood Hills neighborhood during the time when either Celeste died or her body was found. So again, we don't know for sure, but what's Langston's alleged role in this? What could it be?
He the snitch.
So I want to talk.
So Langston was the one that told
Langston possibly testifying in front of the grand jury today, what it means. Let me bring on.
So like I said, I believe that Neo Langston is the key to all of this. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to David being arrested, I think he went in there and told everything that he knew. Yeah, that's what I think. Hold on, let's go here.
Everybody, welcome to the show. So we begin tonight with this breaking news. Singer David, real name David Anthony Burke, has been arrested after 7 months. The 21-year-old was taken into custody by the Los Angeles Police Department on suspicion.
7 months. Suspicion of an M. Not for an M, but suspicion of one. He has been simply detained at this point until they can get an indictment and a proper warrant. They had a warrant to detain him, but I think that's
of murder in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. And police say the arrest happened today with detectives from the LAPD's Robbery and Homicide Division taking Burke into custody. He is now being held without bail. To be clear, I mentioned this before, this is a major break in the case that has been haunting investigators for months. To be clear also, he is innocent until proven guilty. I'll talk about what this all means. But ever since September 2025, when police popped the trunk of a Tesla that was found abandoned in the Hollywood Hills and discovered the dismembered body of teenage runaway Celeste Rivas Hernandez, we have been talking about it. And as the investigation unfolded, there were even more disturbing alleged details emerged, including that parts of her body had been placed in bags inside the vehicle. And since then, there has been intense speculation for over.
My bad, y'all. So we already, my bad, I was about to double play some that I already played. Hold on. Let's go here to where the investigator, kind of breaks all of this down for us, guys, when it comes to what's going on right now in the David situation. Let's go here.
Very beginning, who has been very vocal about his frustrations and now has a theory as to what this arrest may mean. Private investigator Steve Fisher is coming on. I want to do a full breakdown of what just happened in the last 20. I can't talk about the arrest of 21-year-old David Anthony Burke, the singer, for the alleged murder of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez without bringing on Steve Fisher. We've had him on for so long. We've had him on for months. The private investigator who has been on the ground following this case from the very beginning, who has been quite vocal about his frustrations with this investigation and with an apparent lack of action, lack of transparency. Remember, Steve represents the owner of the property that David was reportedly staying at in the Hollywood Hills, apparently near where that Tesla was found with Celeste's body inside before it was towed to an LA tow yard. And remember, when I say Celeste's body was reportedly found in that car, decomposed, dismembered. And to give you a timeline here as we do this kind of case breakdown, as we try to analyze what is happening right now with this arrest, and to be clear, David has.
I never said David. I never said the little dude was a snitch. I just said he told on David.
This Tesla,
what are you saying?
again, reportedly registered to David, is ticketed. It's marked as possibly abandoned, and this leads to it eventually getting towed. September 8th, at that tow yard in LA is where authorities discover Celeste's body after reports of a foul odor coming from the car. Decomposed, dismembered, her body parts in bags. September 18th, detectives execute a search warrant at the residence that David was purportedly staying at. Reportedly, they collected electronics.
This is taking us from then to now, when it first broke, till right now, what we're going through.
Computers. David also canceled his Wither tour at this point, so we no longer publicly hear from him or see him up until his arrest yesterday. November 21st, the County of Los Angeles Department of Medical Examiner receives a court order reportedly initiated by the LAPD to place a security hold on the medical examiner's finding. So essentially, the court sealed the records, meaning cause of death, those other details not to be publicly released. By the way, November was interesting because the LAPD indicated that it was standing by its prior September 29th statement, quote, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner has not yet determined the cause or manner of Ms. Rivas Hernandez's death. As such, it remains unclear whether there is any criminal culpability beyond the concealment of her body. And now remember, he's just been arrested for her murder, so I would imagine something has changed there. December 2025, we start hearing reports that evidence is being presented in front of a grand jury. We even hear reports that a record executive was grilled by the prosecutor, allegedly being asked, why didn't you call police? Now, grand jury, this is what's confusing. It's not usually the way we know it. They're presented evidence and they come back and determine whether there's enough probable cause for an indictment, right? An official charge against somebody. There's also investigative grand juries that hear evidence. They can issue subpoenas. They can lock in testimony, and maybe they're not tasked with returning back an indictment. February 12th, we learn that David's purported friend, Neo Langston, was arrested out in Montana, reportedly on a warrant for failure to appear as a witness, is subsequently brought back to LA to testify, we presume in front of the grand jury. Later that month, we learn more details from court filings. This is actually in connection with attempts to subpoena David's family members to testify.
They are not biased reporting.
That David is reportedly...
They are not biased reporting, Sharika. They are not biased reporters. They just giving the facts.
The target of a murder investigation, and we learn how Celeste was reportedly dismembered. April 16th, David is arrested. Now, this came in from the LA County District Attorney's Office. Quote, our office is aware of the arrest of David Anthony Burke by the Los Angeles Police Department. The case is expected to be presented to the Major Crimes Division, at which point prosecutors will review the facts and evidence to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to file charges. At this time, additional information is not available. We will share an update on Monday once a filing decision has been made. And then this came in really late last night, early morning. Good evening. The individual mentioned is still in LAPD custody. You may reach out to the district attorney's office once the case has been presented to them. Then on Thursday night, the public information officer for LAPD put this out on X. Detectives from Los Angeles Police Department Robbery Homicide Division have arrested David Burke, a 21-year-old resident of Los Angeles, for the murder of Celeste Rivas. Burke is being held without bail. The case will be presented to the district attorney's office on Monday for filing consideration. Now, the attorneys for David released a statement. So this is from Blair Burke, Marilyn Bednarski, and Regina Peter. They say, let us be clear, the actual evidence in this case will show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and he was not the cause of her death. There has been no indictment returned by any grand jury in this case and no criminal complaint filed.
That's what his legal team said. You know what I'm saying? He's been simply detained, not arrested, and he was not the cause of her passing.
David has only been detained under suspicion. We will vigorously defend David's innocence. And before I bring on Steve Fisher to break down more of our questions on this case and his perspective and his reaction and what we can expect next, here's what Steve had to say on X last night. Quote, David was arrested by complaint, not indictment, and this case will be submitted to the DA's office by Monday for charging consideration. Now, again, he said this, I think, before the attorney's statement. This likely means either the grand jury did not return an indictment or the DA chose not to seek one. An arrest by complaint means that there will be a preliminary hearing to determine probable cause. This is a public hearing where evidence is presented and witnesses are questioned under oath, something that is bypassed with a grand jury indictment. It will be important to see whether this reflects a difference in strategy or a difference of opinion regarding the strength of the case between LAPD and the DA, or if there is another reason for proceeding this way. Immunity agreements, whether formal or informal proffer, remain in effect, even though there was no indictment. Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Okay.
It's crazy, right? Hold on real quick. Let me see if I can fix these comments, guys. I'm gonna play this song. This is David's songs, Romantic Homicide. I'm gonna play it while I try to fix this song, man. You know what I'm saying? For some reason, it ain't letting me click on the comments, guys. I don't know what it is. I just tried to fix it. It still didn't do it. All right, let's go.
I want to bring in Steve Fisher right now. Steve, you have been all on top of this. I mentioned before.
Ain't no way, Miss Pooper, I'm telling you.
Your feelings on this.
Sound like an admission.
I'm curious, just from a human point of view,
how
you feel about this moment since you've been waiting for there to be an arrest. And to be clear, you know, again, David hasn't been officially charged. He's innocent until proven guilty. But this is not exactly what you were looking for, right? I think we all imagined that when there would be an arrest, there would be a charge, right? That this was going to be a grand jury indictment. So I'm curious, from a human point of view, how do you feel after 7 months that he has been arrested but not charged?
You know, well, it's a tough one. I feel a little bit better, obviously, that it looks like the process is starting, but this is not how I imagined it starting. You know, from what we see in the paperwork, it appears they went the grand jury route, and to find out that there's not an indictment here is worrying. It appears that there's maybe a difference of opinion between the LAPD and the DA's office as to whether what the charges should be, or if there should be charges. And you know, we don't know if it went for a vote and it came back with no true bill, no indictment. That's very concerning. And even if they didn't, if the DA hasn't said.
So this is a private investigator that investigated this case, speaking on, you know, how he feels about David being arrested but not charged yet.
For vote, or asked for basically a vote yet, or for an indictment. Why? So listen, Monday's going to be a big day. You know, that's the day they have to decide whether there'll be charges right now or not, or whether he's released.
What's the biggest hole in this case? Is it the idea of the cause of death? Is it the idea of understanding what David's alleged role is? Is it the idea that he's the only one currently arrested? I mean, what would be the thing that might be missing? I interviewed Bradford Cohen, who agrees there might be some disagreement of thought in terms of the LAPD and the DA's office. You know this case better than anybody. What might be lacking in a potential prosecution here?
Well, I think that so the prosecutor's name that we've seen attached to a lot of the grand jury filings that have come public is known for being very, very, very thorough. And if this case had that smoking gun evidence, if it had that crime scene, if it had the blood, whatnot, then I think we would have seen charges very quickly. But we didn't. So that means this is a circumstantial case. This is probably going to rely on testimony by people like Neil Langston or Rob Morganrath, the manager. And I don't know if that particular district attorney really wanted that type of case. So a couple things I think we'll be telling Monday are, one, if he's charged, and if he is, who the prosecuting attorney is on it. And so I think maybe, and this is pure speculation, I don't have any inside information on this part of it. It's just my thought process is that there probably is a difference of opinion, and it probably is more circumstantial case than they want.
More of a circumstantial, you know what I'm saying, rather than physical evidence or anything like that against David. He feels like it's circumstantial, guys. 7 months, he's just not getting brought in, and he still hasn't been charged with the M yet. Simply detained.
Before I go into what could happen Monday, has your client reacted to this arrest at all?
He has. He's has reservations. This is not. Listen, we're glad it happened. There's no doubt, and I'm not knocking LAPD for going forward and making the arrest. It's just there's a big question mark as to what's going to happen Monday, because if the DA wasn't comfortable either sending it to a grand jury for vote, are they comfortable actually being under the gun and having to file charges on Monday?
What's the process? Do they announce charges after a few hours on Monday, and then it goes to a preliminary hearing in front of a judge to determine there's enough probable cause? Do they bring it back to a grand jury for an indictment? Because one of the things we were wondering is this grand jury, this reported grand jury that's been hearing evidence, were they just an investigative grand jury that didn't have the power to indict? They were just there to hear evidence, get subpoenas, lock in testimony. So what actually will happen by the end of the day on Monday, end of the day on Tuesday?
Well, I imagine I would not be surprised. There's going to be a couple different angles here, because the DA's office is going to come under a lot of pressure right now. But that doesn't mean that they're going to make a decision on pressure. So they'll probably use, I would imagine, most of the day on Monday. They can only hold a person so long without being charged or cutting them loose. And as far as then what the process is, it's hard to say. I think there's going to be some gamesmanship here going on. I think that ultimately David would probably waive his right to speedy trial, just possibly to give his attorneys more time. But if not, a preliminary hearing comes up, or they can send it back to a grand jury. We don't even know if there's a grand jury seated right now, because in LA County, you can only hold criminal grand juries for 30 days. So if this grand jury process has been going on for months and months, these have been different grand juries. And so maybe now it is a grand jury that has charging power. If it was just investigated before, it's really hard to say what it looks like right now, because there hasn't been any movement.
Right. Let me ask you this. He was in the Hollywood Hills possibly this whole time, and we saw authorities in tactical gear making the arrest. We weren't sure where he was. Did you have any idea that he was at this house in the Hollywood Hills?
Yeah, so I learned about 2.5 months ago that he was in West Hollywood, and it really surprised me, to be honest with you. At the very beginning, I knew he was still in LA, but I thought he had probably gone home to Texas, and especially with what was going on with his parents fighting their subpoenas, their grand jury subpoenas. I thought he had probably gone back, even though like 2.5 months ago I had learned that he was in West Hollywood. But I figured he'd left by then, because I hadn't heard anything in the last few weeks. So I was surprised he was still there, and he kept a secret really well. I don't think he moved around much. I know he was receiving things under, another false name, but I think he shows that he thinks his career is going to take off again one day.
But there was no indication like he was about to leave the country and like we have to immediately make an arrest before something happens. Like you saw the photos from the arrest. I've seen the reporting from it. I haven't seen anything that there was a level of violence, that he was, fighting it, that they chased him. I don't know if his attorney got advance notice that this was happening, but I didn't see anything to indicate. You tell me that he was a flight risk or anything.
No, and what I did see is that there were some U.S. Marshals there as well. They had tactical vests on, so I think that they probably knew where he was the whole time. I think they were keeping an eye on him for preventative reasons. He was free to come and go. We could even leave the country if he wanted to. But I think they were keeping an eye on him. It probably gives him a little bit a sense of power, knowing that, something's not happened with a grand jury. I probably, isn't feeling too bad about it.
What did you make of his lawyer's statement?
I think that it probably did catch. I don't know if they got advance notice, because it seemed like it was, to say that it wasn't even charged by complaint. I think there is I think it's safe to say there's a complaint there. They said that they did send a complaint up by Monday. So I don't know. Listen, this is where high dollar attorneys really can excel, right? When it's a circumstantial type case, and they can get the high dollar expert witnesses and pick them apart. And
they said there was that he's not the cause of death. How do they know that?
Well, exactly. Well, that's the other thing. Like, there's certain things like this that the evidence will show. Well, what is do they know what that evidence is? Like, what communication have they had with the DA's office or with LAPD? Because from what we understand, he hasn't even sat for an interview with LAPD, so he doesn't even know exactly what those questions will be. Are there other people that have appeared in front of the grand jury that they've been able to debrief? Hard to say. It seems like they do have some handle on what the evidence is, though.
Were you surprised there were no other charges against him, and were you surprised that nobody else was arrested?
Yeah, I was, because there are other crimes here. Listen, we know that the mutilation of a corpse alone is now that's a felony, because it's not simply the concealment, like we've heard in the LAPD press release originally. This was mutilation, so it was a whole different thing. There is sex crimes. So I'm very, very confident. This is just my opinion from what I've seen, but I've talked to victims that there's sex crimes here, and in a lot.
Absolutely,
you'll see,
if she was as young as they say she was, which she was, but if they able to tie him to her, they were saying he'd been talking to this girl since she was like 11 and 13 years old. Come on, man.
Kind of a bunch of charges thrown at the wall, and then they'll take them off as they get further down, after prelim and whatnot. But that's not the case here. It sounds like it's a single charge type of complaint, and it's also what we saw. It matches up with what we saw in the paperwork filed in Texas, where they talked about a single charge of murder 187, which is murder of forethought. It's a strong charge. It's the strongest charge, but why not throw them all out there in case something like this happens?
And you, right before his arrest, you went on X, you expressed your frustration with the lack of action, with the lack of movement here, and you believe that authorities haven't been consistent with the crimes that were allegedly committed here, right? Their discussion of what happened here, right?
Yeah, listen, it's been a very frustrating process. The only reason that myself and my client are still involved in this is because we want to make sure that there's justice for this young teen who he was taken advantage of and ultimately murdered. And it's been a very slow process. I understand investigations take time. However, it seemed like it was stalling out, and maybe this is proof that it was, because it does seem to me, I haven't seen the interview with their progress, but it seems to me that there is a disconnect between LAPD and the DA's office.
Well, no, even at the very least, you took issue with the fact about, well, there's only concealment of a body that might be charged here, not murder. And you're like, well, if she was dismembered, you were talking about something else here. Well,
what my issue is that, in my opinion, that we got limited press releases in this case. We got 2, I believe, from LAPD. No press conferences, and they were not telling the truth in the press release, where they came out and said
they're not telling the truth. Let's go.
There might not be any criminal culpability beyond concealment of a body, which is in California is a misdemeanor. But once a body is mutilated, that is not concealment of a body any longer. That's mutilation of a corpse, which is a felony. And they knew at the time they put that press release out that she had been dismembered. So that is not true. And then the next press release, the only other press release they came out with, was them saying that they had the medical examiner's records sealed just to make sure that the detectives received that information first. And, that's been months. And why not unseal them?
Is that going to be released now?
I think it has to be, because, listen, I think that if Blair Burke or his attorney, David's attorneys, have reason to believe that they can show that he wasn't the cause of her death, then they'll get that information anyways. But I do think that once this discovery process starts, they're going to unseal them now. And there might have even been a contingency in the sealing documents, or that the judge signed, saying that upon charging or upon indictment or whatever, that these are unsealed within 7 days or something like that, just kind of like a grand jury transcripts would be. Now they won't be, because it wasn't an indictment However, same type of process. So I do think within the next couple of weeks, if he's charged, that those will be unsealed.
Where does Neo Langston fit into all of this? Because you've been quite vocal about him, right? His purported friend who was allegedly arrested for failing to appear as a witness, reportedly brought in front of a criminal proceeding, we assume the grand jury, to testify. He takes to Instagram.
There go his Instagram post, y'all. See, I told y'all he took the IG and basically went off after he was questioned or whatever at the grand jury hearing. Yeah, he was talking real greasy about David.
I don't know, maybe last month or so, had a series of posts where he talked about his silence, how he said the case isn't about me. It's about getting justice for the victim. Really took some shots at seemingly David, called him, I mean, it looked like he was calling him a derogatory name. And he said he has like all the receipts and
receipts.
He said,
that friend, I'm telling you,
I got all my receipts for things. Ha 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 ha. He hasn't been charged. He hasn't been arrested. Where do you think he fits into all this?
Well, I think he knows a lot. And in there, he was saying, he was very vocal. Like you said, he came out and said that he had all of his receipts.
That friend.
And he was legally fined. But then they seemed to leak to TMZ that he didn't even have anything to tell the grand jury. He says only in there for 40 minutes. So it can't be both, right? I think he knows a lot. From what I've investigated personally, I think him and a couple others know a lot. And I think that they probably got some sort of immunity.
Some sort of immunity.
Unfortunately, will probably
for what he had to say. It's all up to the grand jury.
Unfortunately, will probably had. I'm not saying that they're directly tied to the murder itself, but after the fact, I think that they knew certain things that they should have come forward with, and I don't think he's the only one. I think there's three of them. Personally, at least three of them.
The investigator, I think there was three of them that helped.
Walk away with some because I think this is a circumstantial case.
It was interesting. I was talking to Bradford Cohen in another episode of Sidebar, and he was like, look, if someone's involved in the actual murder, there's only so much leeway that the DA would look past. If they're involved in a murder, it'd be kind of unlikely that they'd be granted some sort of protection or immunity. I mean, it depends upon how much they would want the alleged ringleader, the person who's instrumental in this, but it does make you wonder what everybody's alleged role or not role is in all this. Yeah. Again, to be clear, David's the only one who's been arrested. And then I was thinking about, okay, so he's arrested. And I was thinking about his parents and his brother. You mentioned it. They were fighting these subpoenas to testify. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of their testimony would have been. But it was through those filings that we learned more details about what seemingly happened to Celeste. What do you think that's all about with his family now that he's been arrested?
I don't know. And I do think they could be kind of the catalyst for why LAPD went ahead and arrested him on complaint, because shortly after we threw that out there about the filings in Texas and what was going on, and which had all the information about her being dismembered, they filed a motion to seal those records in Texas, and they were successful. So now on the docket, you don't see anything. So we don't even know if that's made its way, because it was like on a third appeal, if it's made its way through the court. And LAPD might have just said, listen, this thing can be hung up for months and months and months in this appeal court. Why do we even need the parents' testimony? Because we're probably not going to get a thing out of them. So maybe they just said, we're going to go ahead and, there's public pressure and people want answers about this 14-year-old that lost her life. And we're going to go ahead and say, we've done our investigation. We think we've gathered everything that's out there to be gathered right now. And here it is. And it's up to the DA whether to charge it or not.
And the Santa Barbara trip that police say he allegedly took in the spring of 2025. Do you have any more clarity about that, if we're thinking about this arrest or how it fits into it?
So I don't have any information on the Santa Barbara trip. I'll tell you that we do have some evidence about a trip to
the extortion just made
forest.
What's up, Lisa B?
It's not Santa Barbara County. It's, I guess, I don't even know if you could confuse it, or but it's not in. It's not close to the LA. There was a trip, I'll say, made to the mountains and area, which is looks a lot like the topography of Santa Barbara, but it's not Santa Barbara. So I don't know if there's another trip we don't know about, or if these two might be getting confused a little bit. But he did make a trip to. In fact, I put a photo out on Twitter a few months ago of a photo he took by himself in a forest location, really remote area. Whether it's that has anything to do with her murder or dismemberment, I don't know, but it's an interesting, photo, but I don't see any evidence of Santa Barbara myself.
Do you know how Celeste's family's doing?
I don't. I've never had any contact with anybody in the family. I've tried to respect their grieving process, their boundaries, but at the same time, did have some questions if they were willing to talk. We've reached out to a couple people in the family. They have not gotten back to us. I do think through people I've talked to, trying to get some further clarity on people that knew David. I do think if he's charged on Monday, I think some more people are going to come forward and be willing to talk. Not that there's more victims or anything, but people that may know some things about how long it's been going on with Celeste, or even other people that had communication with David, but they were underage. I think there might be a few of these people that come forward now. They'll be more comfortable that if he's charged, that's if he's charged.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so before we wrap things up,
he needs to be charged. I think he did it.
Your opinion, your perspective, do you think there is sufficient probable cause to support a murder charge against David for the death of Celeste?
That's a tough question. I'll tell you, without knowing exactly what Neo and possibly Rob, appeared, the manager, what they know, it's hard to say. I do know that I believe there's probable cause for sex crimes and other charges related to holding Celeste, harboring and whatnot. The murder, it's hard to say. I think it's circumstantial.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's
I think it's a circumstantial case, and I have not talked to Neo or those other two people directly, and without knowing what they're going to say, it's hard to say.
We don't have clarity on any of this. We don't have clarity on what anyone's alleged role in this is. Again, David is innocent until proven guilty.
Yep.
He has not been officially charged. We will see if that happens. Obviously, this is a big development, but we're still trying to understand exactly where this fits into the overall story. Steve Fisher, thanks for taking the time. As always, appreciate it.
All right, so that was the private investigator, guys, basically talking about the Celeste Rivera and David case. All right, we find out that David hasn't even been indicted. He's basically being detained. They are looking into his situation, trying to basically come up with more. All right, so one of my most entertaining people I like to watch on the situation with David, is Nancy. Let's see what Nancy got to say about all this.
Straight out to the D4VD case, to Brian Fitzgibbons joining us, Director Operations, USPA Nationwide Security, leading a team of investigators to find missing people and analyze cases. You can find him at USPA Nationwide Security. Brian, what do you make of it? Let's see the video obtained from our friends at TMZ. D4VD now in handcuffs and arrested. Take a look, Brian.
Yeah, Nancy. So there
he
might be a
Nancy, not
significant development here, and what this points to me is that somebody has come forward and provided
his homeboy
a witness statement here that there's some person with information that's related to this case that's come forward. They've had months and months to analyze what would probably amount to be quite a bit of physical and digital evidence. But this new break seems to be, if I had to speculate, is related to a witness coming forward.
Straight out to Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter. Tell me what happened. When did the arrest go down?
The arrest went down late yesterday afternoon, Nancy, and the LAPD saying it's the Hollywood Hills, but not exactly identifying the address. But Nancy, it was important to point out that the LAPD
footage of David,
they had been keeping track of D4VD for some time. They knew exactly where he was. They knew what he had been doing because there was no public appearances. I mean, David Anthony Burke was gone. We couldn't find him anywhere. Didn't know if he was in Texas or California, but the LAPD, they knew exactly where he was. Now, when they got there, they showed up with guns, they showed up with gear, and one of the LAPD's finest on a megaphone from outside of the house is saying, "Surrender, surrender." So that was how he was brought into custody.
Last night, the platinum artist D4VD, aka David Anthony Burke, arrested on suspicion of murder in the death of a 14-year-old little girl,
Nancy,
Celeste Rivas Hernandez. This is 7 months after her body is found dismembered and severely decomposed in the trunk of his Tesla. Now, we understand, and you can see from the video from TMZ, he seemed to be completely cooperative when he was taken into custody.
Arrest
and
footage
I
of
believe that he had been schooled by his parents, one of them being a lawyer, not to resist arrest.
Hey.
LAPD prepared for it.
So we find out that it's true. You know, a lot of people were speculating or saying a little while ago that David's dad was an attorney. Well, Nancy just basically confirmed it. Maybe that's how he was able to elude arrest for 7 months.
Heavily armed and in force. Now, their lawyers, Burke's lawyers, quickly issue a statement that I'm sure they've had ready for weeks. Let's be clear. The evidence will show he did not murder Celeste Rivas, and he was not the cause of her death. Here's the deal.
What's up, Cupcake?
To you, Brian Fitzgibbons, USPA Nationwide Security. So much time went by from the time of her death to the time her body was discovered. Her body was in deep decomposure. She was also dismembered. We may never get a COD, cause of death. So at trial, D4VD could very well take the stand and state it was all an accident. Then he panicked and hid the body. I could see that playing out in court, but why dismember the body? And if there was an accident, why not call 911 to save her life?
Yeah, that's correct. And we saw a very similar thing, defense play out with Brian Walsh, with the murder of Anna Walsh. And prosecutors were able to establish through digital evidence and forensic evidence that there was
Shout out to Cut Up Girl for being a member for the last 18 months. She says he's the type to off himself. To off himself in jail. Dang, I hear you.
intent, that there was intent to cover this up. And these things will come into play for D4VD. And what I'll add to this is anybody in his circle, and there was another arrest, I believe yesterday as well, for somebody who failed to respond to a subpoena related to this case. So you're seeing, you're peeking behind the curtain here of what investigators have uncovered is probably a lot of communications and digital evidence around this conspiracy.
You know, we talked from the get-go, Brian Fitzgibbons, you and I, about potential digital evidence. When you say digital evidence, be specific, because I think you're right.
Yeah, Nancy ain't going to cut David no slack.
What I'm specifically referring to is going to be communications, messaging apps on cell phones, whether it's cell phone communication, direct SMS, or through another application, that their investigators have probably obtained some amount of those messages that would indicate that there was some conspiracy here to cover up this crime.
You know, another thing to point out, Brian Fitzgibbons, joining us, USPA Nationwide Security.
What do you think about David just basically being detained and not charged? You know what I'm saying? He was arrested on suspicion of doing what he did with the M, but not actually indicted by a grand jury. They're trying to get that now.
With murder. He's not charged with voluntary. He's not charged with involuntary. He's not charged with felony murder, which is a death occurs in commission of a felony. Jeremy. That felony, for example, could be if he was having sex with her. It could be It could be aggravated assault. It could be false imprisonment, keeping her in the mansion if she didn't want to be there. It could be improperly influencing a child. In other words, helping her run away from home. It could be all sorts of things, and she died. No intent to kill her, but that's not what he's charged with. He is charged with murder. That tells me that they've got more than what they found on her remains, that they have a witness. Because how could they know they've got the facts to charge him with murder? Murder is the intentional, with malice aforethought, killing of another person. That means you intend the act. Like if I strangle you, if it only takes me 1 minute, that gives me time to form intent. If I raise the gun and pull the trigger, that gives me time to form intent. They have charged him with murder, not a lesser charge. So they've got something. What is it?
Yeah, and spot on.
Got him detained, Nancy, detained.
And one of these witnesses
under suspicion. I don't know, man. They got to charge him, and then, right now he's just detained.
is very likely investigators had enough to charge them with a serious crime. What we're dealing with here is a minor who is away from home, and that witness may be looking at, hey, I'm facing these charges if I don't turn state's evidence and tell them what I know about what occurred, right? And I think that that's very likely what happened here.
Come on, Nancy.
If you have been leaning on of D4VD, try to quash their subpoenas to come and testify, that was denied. Straight up to Tammy Ballard joining us, DNA crime scene expert. Tammy, what do you think could have been found, forensic evidence such as DNA or other evidence found at the scene that led them to charge murder, not a lesser charge, but intentional with malice aforethought, the killing of another person? What could it be?
Well, I would actually wonder if they identified through some sort of investigative capabilities where the
Jeremy, I ain't gonna tell you no stories. He wasn't no gangster rapper. He was more of a gothic, crazy man music maker.
actual crime scene is. There's obviously a secondary crime scene. So that's a possible that somebody came forward and they've identified where she was actually murdered.
We have also gotten a peek at the wording in the court documents. Quote, detectives partially unzip a bag and observe a decomposed head and torso. This was according to the subpoena that we have.
This was on a subpoena, man. They unzipped the bag and saw a head, a detached head, and a torso.
Quote, detectives partially unzip a bag and observe a decomposed head and torso.
That is so crazy, y'all. Prayers for that young lady. Wow, man. I know the police was in shock when they unzipped that bag. God, dog.
This is according to the subpoena that we have seen from LA County ME's office. Upon removing the cadaver bag from the front storage compartment of the Tesla, it was discovered the arms and legs had been severed from the body. A second black bag was discovered underneath the cadaver bag. Upon opening the second bag, the dismembered body parts were discovered. Wow. Dave Mack, talk about a nightmare. That would make a rookie cop run for the hills and never look back.
Run to the
Two bags. See, we're learning more once we've obtained information from these documents tonight. 2 bags were found in the front trunk of the Tesla. Let's see a shot of that. Remember, the smell emanated there at the impound lot. And when they opened the front, there was the body. We didn't know there were 2 separate bags, one referred to as a cadaver bag. And in that bag is the head and torso. There's a bag under that with the rest of her body parts. We also learned, Dave Mack, the subpoena states that a cadaver bag covered with insects and a strong odor of decay was found.
shocking information, Nancy, as you mentioned. You know, it was the smell that actually attracted the workers at the impound lot. You know, because the vehicle was towed there. It sat there for a couple of.
That is horrible. That is horrible. I know that smell had to be dreadful, guys. Lord have mercy.
Days before they actually went, what the heck, man? This is horrible, and called police. But as you mentioned, now we've got 2 bags, one actually listed as a body bag. A quick search online to find out, where do you get a body bag? Somebody who doesn't work in that field. You can order them online, and they had been used. The body bags had been used in some D4.
You can rent a body bag online? Lord have mercy.
I don't know if it was purchased for that purpose, but eventually some of the remains of Celeste Rivas Hernandez found in that body bag in the trunk of the Tesla.
Well, Tammy Ballard, that's your Super Bowl right there. A body bag, 2 of them. They're typically of I would say, a plastic nature. That's perfect as a conduit for fingerprints.
That's a great potential. And the fact that it's actually 2 bags is even better potential for DNA testing as well. Just because if she's actually contained within those items, then at least some of that decomposition is going to not have affected all of the potential DNA recovery and the fingerprint recovery. So the exterior of those bags needs to be focused on. Those bags, I'm assuming, are made pretty well if they're actually supposed to contain all the elements of a body. So it would be something where they could focus on that and try to obtain any relevant evidence that they can. Fingerprints, DNA, even trace evidence like hairs. This is the kind of stuff where, and the expectation obviously is that he's going to have his own DNA in his own trunk, but maybe they have additional information that they can look for, or just use this to corroborate his role in this.
Man, y'all,
American homeowner. The forge we partnered
one of the head into us, the other with the rest of the body. That's how they found out that
where of the arrest
had been
when Monday
basically
presenting a case states. Well, this is another fact that we know. We know D4VD's defense states, well, there's no indictment, but police have stated they are presenting a case to prosecutors at LA County DA's office on Monday. The office in its statement says it's aware of the arrest. When they get the case, then they present it to the grand jury. Now, isn't it true, Dave Mack, that a D4VD grand jury is nothing new? There has been a D4VD grand jury for months. They have been investigating the case. So this is probably going to be the same grand jury they're going to put the indictment to.
It's the same jury that's been sitting since November, Nancy. It started out as an investigative jury, and we were told so many different things about what this jury could do or couldn't do. And then found out later that they were investigating the death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and that David Burke was the focus. So a lot is going to come out Monday when we find out what the next step is going to be. But, for the time being, David Anthony Burke is in jail without bail.
What are you saying, Dave Mack? What are you saying till we find out what the next step is going to be?
Nancy.
The next step is an indictment. That's the next step. The long dead body of this little girl found in D4VD David Anthony Burke's Tesla, found one day after she would have turned 15. She was just 13 years old in the 7th grade when her family reported her missing. She was with D4VD, and after that, they never said another word. Nothing. Where have they been all this time? Why are we the only ones banging the drum, demanding justice? Brian Fitzgibbons, this is very odd behavior on the parents' part. Never issuing a public plea, never thanking.
There go Nancy getting on the parents, understand me? Yeah, like where were the parents?
The LAPD for finding their girl, never demanding justice. I'd be laying on the front steps of the courthouse screaming for justice. Nothing. Radio silent. And now an indictment is set to go down, and they're what? What? Where are they?
Yeah, it's incomprehensible, the fact that there hasn't been a large outcry from her family. You know, that being said, there isn't a playbook for these scenarios, but it is a bizarre situation that the media has been standing up for her a lot more than the family.
You know, Fitzgibbons, I have never gotten a tangle with you. But did you actually
Somebody
just
said
say
the
there's no
parents got
playbook
paid
for
out.
this sort of thing?
I
Parents
did.
have a child, 13, that go missing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you have a couple of little girls?
Of course, and you know what I would be
and
doing.
if one goes missing, what would you do? Suck your thumb?
Hey, you know what I would be doing, Nancy. It's just
I'd have to take the gun out of your hand, off of your leg, off of your back, the machete out of the other hand, and lock you up in the basement and let you go kill somebody. But they've done nothing. No demands for justice. No, where is my child? They had one measly missing person report. That was it.
Yeah, it's absolutely bizarre. And hey, you know, that might be something that comes out in this indictment is, was there intimidation? Was there pressure put on the family by somebody like D4DV, who has a significant amount of wealth and assets, to pressure a family like Celeste Rivas?
Look at D4VD.
It's crazy that he ain't
weighs
been
100 pounds
indicted,
soaking
y'all.
wet.
He's not indicted.
You think he's going to intimidate a full-grown man, the father of Celeste, or a mother, God forbid? I'd rip his eyes out if he took my girl or if he took my boy. Oh, HELLNO, nothing. What I'm saying is, where have they been? And all the time she was missing, she took up with D4VD when she was 13 years old. Check your law book.
100%. Yeah, I mean,
man,
hey,
you sure know how to change your tune.
I most definitely
I'll take it up
agree
with you
that.
later. Guys, tip line first for Mrs. Guthrie. A lot is happening behind the scenes.
All right. So she say, so we see what Nancy felt regarding David, guys. Now to this Nancy Guthrie situation. All right. So David has been detained under suspicion of unaliving Celeste. He hasn't been indicted, y'all. He's only in there basically detained. So when it comes to that's what's going on so far with David, right? And we think that his best friend, I think his best friend told on him, if you ask me, you know. But that's speculation until they come forward with it. There's been updates going on in the Nancy Guthrie case, guys. I think this thing has been going on for like 72 days. And at first it was a hot topic. Now they really don't talk about it too much anymore. But there has been more DNA found at her house, guys. Check this out.
FBI investigators at Quantico could be on the verge, perhaps, of a critical breakthrough in the Nancy Guthrie case, potentially using a new and cutting-edge technology that has proven to extract DNA from even the most difficult and degraded evidence. Our Brian Enton has learned that strands of hair were found inside Nancy Guthrie's home during what we believe were the initial phases of the investigation, and that those strands of hair have now been sent to the FBI for, quote, advanced analysis 2 months after she went missing. Until now, the Pima County Sheriff's Office has been using a Florida lab to handle all of its DNA testing, a decision that was controversial from the start.
Want to get exactly what I got from my source right. Some DNA evidence from Nancy Guthrie's home has been sent to the FBI's lab for advanced analysis. I'm told that the evidence includes hairs found in Guthrie's home. And that's an interesting part of this because we haven't known in the past that some of the evidence that they are testing for DNA has been hairs.
FBI sources
hairs, guys. They got hairs.
With their limited access to the DNA, and the sheriff's office has struggled with analyzing so-called mixed DNA found at the crime scene. Experts believe the hair that is finally being sent to the FBI lab is likely rootless, meaning there's very little, if any, actual human tissue on the strands. Previously, those hairs were useless in criminal investigations in cases like this. But now there's something called whole genome sequencing. It's a method that extracts nuclear DNA.
All right, so they finna use some new technique, guys, to find out who the masked guy was.
From just the shaft of a stray hair. You don't need the root on the end. To give you an idea of just how mind-blowing the technology is, it's the same kind of DNA testing that helped break the case of Rex Heuermann, the Gilgo Beach serial killer. Of course, we don't yet know whose hair this is and whether it belongs to the suspect, to Nancy herself, or to any other person who might have wandered through her home at any time. But it does seem like investigators at least have a hunch that this could lead to something big. Joining us now is renowned DNA expert and genetic genealogist Cece Moore, the nation's premier DNA expert, and former CIA officer and News Nation national security contributor Tracy Walter. Great to have both of you with us. Cece, this lab in Florida wasn't able to do anything with the hair, but now they've sent it to Quantico where they're able to do this sort of mixed DNA testing?
The hair is not the mixed DNA that we've been hearing about. Hair would be single source. The lab in Florida does have some capabilities, and if there had been a root, they would have already tested this and I'm sure been successful. It's a lot harder when you don't have the root, which is why we believe this is rootless hair or a hair shaft. The FBI themselves would not be
yes,
the ones
it is.
trying
It
to
is
extract
very
DNA
crazy.
from that,
Nancy
because they
Guthrie.
were for
Shout
the
out to you for
company
being in the
in
building.
Santa Cruz called Estrella Forensics. That's who has done all of the rootless hair work for the FBI, including in the Rex Heuermann Gilgo Beach murders.
So the hair actually won't be tested at Quantico. Quantico will then send it to this lab in Santa Cruz.
If it's rootless, absolutely. Yeah, they might be testing it in other ways, but to extract that DNA, that SNP profile that we need for genetic.
So at first they had that glove. Now it seems that they have hair.
Genealogy, they would be sending that to Estrella, I'm sure, because they've had such a track record with them and so much success in the past.
Tracy, why do you think they're focusing on these strands of hair, given, I mean, it could come from anywhere, anyone, at any time?
Well, you're right. I mean, I think, listen, any kind of forensic evidence that's at the scene can be attributed to anyone. It can be the suspect, it could be the victim, it could be so many different people. But the problem is we need this information to be able to rule people out or rule people in this case. And so in a case like this, where we really actually don't have a lot of digital forensic evidence, which obviously the FBI is very good at, really this becomes very, very important. We have a clear lack of video forensic evidence, as we have seen, as well as really phone and those kinds of forensic evidence. And so I think in this case, there's no question that hair is going to be important in terms of ruling whomever that is in or out. And the FBI is going to probably have to investigate if they can get a hold on it, who it is.
Cece, most hair found at crime scenes, is it rootless hair, just the shaft?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's really common to test the root from a hair with forensic evidence. But we are finding that there are thousands of cases that don't have any other type of DNA evidence. And that's why this is so
You're talking
groundbreaking.
No blood, no saliva,
Right.
No semen, nothing.
Right. And so that's why we've been suddenly able to solve cases that weren't even solvable prior to even with genetic genealogy. So genetic genealogy came in 2018. The ability that Dr. Ed Green created to extract this profile from rootless hair is even newer than that. So it's another leap forward that opens up a lot more cases to potentially be solved.
How long will it take the lab, Estrella lab, to test?
They're gonna get it they're gonna find out who it is from a piece of hair.
This hair.
Well, in my experience, because I've worked with them a lot, it typically takes months. But I'm guessing, because this is not a cold case, that they will likely push it up in priority and start working on it immediately. And then part of it is luck. Sometimes they can get DNA the first time around, and sometimes they have to go through several attempts before they can get that viable profile.
Tracy, you know, since you've been covering this case with us, there's been so much criticism of the Pima County Sheriff and the decisions that he and his team made on this case. A lot of that criticism was about the fact that they chose to use this lab in Florida, which I need to point out is quite reputable. A lot of law enforcement agencies use it and have great success with it. What's your assessment of that lab, and should the Pima County Sheriff have relied on that lab instead of Quantico from the start? Because that's a lot of people are criticizing him for making that choice.
Thank you for making that point about the lab. This is a lab that is actually certified by the FBI. This isn't some, random lab that they sent this sample to. So I just want to make that point clear. However, obviously, as a former FBI agent, I try to go a little bit easier on anyone in law enforcement, but I actually vehemently disagree with what Sheriff Nanos did in this case. I think in a case of this nature, now listen, at Quantico, they can't just process all of the DNA evidence that comes in. This is why we have private labs, for speed and for efficiency. But in a case like this, where you may know that you may have some DNA samples, or some biological samples that maybe didn't get DNA from, it should have immediately gone to the FBI. I think they lost 11 weeks of time.
Yeah. And now Cece's telling us it could conceivably be a few months before the lab in California actually gets results from this shaft of hair. Just remind us, Cece, how did they make the break in the Gilgo Beach serial killer using this exact same kind of testing?
Yeah, there were a number of hairs found on multiple victims in the burlap sacks, on the belts, and a couple other places. They were able to extract SNP profiles from those and perform genetic genealogy. And they led to Rex Heuermann, his wife, and his daughter. So pretty damning.
And so that case, that was a cold case if there was one. I mean, he had been, he just pleaded guilty. He'd been killing for many, many years. And these cases had gone unsolved for many, many years. So that was a case with no evidence, and they were able to crack it. I mean, Tracy, I can only hope that we're not going to wait that long.
Man, I'm
sure
days,
the Guthrie family is praying.
I got a question. She's been missing for like 72 days, guys. Do y'all think she's still alive? Let me know in the chat.
Don't have to wait that long to get some sort of answer.
I would hope that we don't have to wait that long, but to Cece's point, we don't know how long it's ultimately going to take them. And in a missing persons case where you don't necessarily have bodies, whereas you did in Gilgo Beach, that is another issue that sort of complicates all of this as well. So you've got that passage of time, not a lot of forensic evidence, not a lot of digital evidence, and obviously no person or no victim in this case. And so I hope it gets solved a lot quicker than that, but we are dealing every minute and every second really counts.
Yeah.
We also don't know if that hair does belong to the kidnapper or not. And we won't know that until they've processed it, extracted the DNA, and been able to perform genetic genealogy to identify who that does belong to.
Yeah, I think people might not realize how many stray hairs. I mean, hair falls off the human head all the time. People walking through.
And it's not just head hair. It can be other types of hair, facial hair, legs, arms, pubic hairs, all of those are able to be used.
And by the way, Tracy, this is a 65 or an 84-year-old woman who could not walk easily. There was blood on the front stoop, which indicates it was her blood. She was injured perhaps in some way.
Prayers for Nancy.
There might have been a struggle, in which case hair might have been, left at the scene.
I actually said that, I don't know if it was on your show, but on a different show, that if there was a struggle, it was probably a mild struggle, right? Because she is 84 years old and she does have health conditions. However, that could absolutely be useful in this case, and that we do have some of that DNA. And to Cece's point, all those black gloves that they were talking about, you don't know that those, necessarily belong to a perpetrator in this case. So not only do you have to identify that DNA, but then you have to investigate who that DNA belongs to rule them in and out as suspects. So we're dealing with some time here.
Yeah. Cece Moore, Tracy Walder, really appreciate it. Cece, this technology is utterly fascinating. It's unbelievable what these labs can now do. Thank you so much for explaining it in a way that I think we can all understand. Tracy already knew it, but not me. Anyway.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, ladies. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
So they are using hair follicles to try to find out who kidnapped Nancy Guthrie, guys. And like I always say, there's nobody tough on them than Nancy. Let's go to the other Nancy and see what she had to say about this whole situation with Nancy Guthrie.
Yeah, a bombshell arrest in the disappearance and death of a young teen girl, Celeste.
We already heard
tonight.
that. Hold on.
Nano said at the get-go. Also, Tammy Ballard
and the same with new information. Same general area as we and
out for one of the first four. Dave Mack reports in the first to Tucson, straight out to Crime Stories investigative reporter Dave Mack reports in the late night hours that a person south of Tucson had been detained for questioning. Now, correct me if I'm wrong,
this is
but isn't that the same
case,
general
guys.
area where someone was detained before? Several weeks ago, nearly at the get-go, and everyone was so happy that maybe the case had been resolved, and then it turned out the person was released. In fact, in that case, the SWAT team rolled out for one of the first times since Nancy Guthrie went missing, and they were poised also nearby a hostage negotiator, we were told, but it all fizzled out. What do you know?
Nancy, that is exactly what happened. And it appears that we're right back in that same general area as we had been before. And now we're being led to the trough, you know, the possible suspect. There's possible new information, but Pima County not jumping in, nobody providing us with a lot of information on this, Nancy, other than what we're putting together by saying, hey, they're in the same general area that we've already been once before. And remember, Nancy, you mentioned that was a big undertaking that last time with the SWAT team, a negotiator. They had the law enforcement had a plan that they were putting into action, and it ended up being nothing. Now we're 2 months down the road, and a lot more information has come in. We're getting some DNA evidence back, and now back in the same place. So we'll have to wait and see what happens next.
Well, the good thing this time to Tammy Ballard joining us, DNA.
Don't sit right with us, Leisha. This is a crazy story, man. This lady been missing for like 79 days, probably 80 days or something like that. And they just don't got no real suspects and have no clue where she is.
Crime scene consultant, crime scene investigator, reconstructionist, former DNA criminalist for the San Diego Police Department Crime Lab. Tammy, thank you for being with us tonight. Tammy, we also know that contrary to what Nano said at the get-go, in the last weeks, the FBI has confirmed that they obtained DNA from inside Nancy Guthrie's home. Many, including me, believe it was from her bedroom. We are also learning from sources that it is, in fact, a hair. Now, we could do a lot of finger pointing right now about why Nano's team didn't find it. What a miracle it is that the FBI found it weeks later. Reality, they found it. Now, we understand it's a hair. If that's true, Tammy Ballard, what does that mean? And I also know this, Tammy, that the FBI is testing it at their labs. It has not been sent to the teacher's pet lab that Nanos has had a contract with.
It actually is the greatest time for there to be hair recovered from a scene because the technology right now is on point. In the old days, you had to have that hair, which is also very hard to find. So you have to give the crime scene people some credit because it is that's a difficult evidentiary piece right there. But once it's located, now is one of the best times in the forensics world because you used to have that really great hair root for DNA. And now you have these laboratories across the country that are able to extract a DNA profile from a hair that is not even having that great root material. So what we call rootless hairs.
Joining us is Tammy Ballard, and she is referring to nuclear DNA from a hair, which you get from a root. What she's talking about is a nuclear hair sample where the root is obtained. In the root of
Yeah, they say it could be the maid or anyone. So many people in that house. This whole thing is ridiculous. All right, I feel you. Yeah, man, but it's just crazy. You can just up and go completely missing in 2026.
your hair, you have your dad's DNA and your mother's DNA, nuclear, like the nuclear family, nuclear DNA. If the root is not still attached to the hair, no problem. We now have mitochondrial DNA, which is only from your mother's side, but it can still be a match. No problem. I'd always rather have nuclear, but if I don't have it, fine. What we have is a hair now being analyzed by the FBI. What exactly, Tammy, is the difference between analyzing, let's just say, blood or sperm, and let's go with the least desirable, mitochondrial DNA from a hair? What's the difference in those two DNA analysis? For those of you just joining us, we hear in the night hours someone, a male, south of Tucson, detained for questioning, but then everything went
Pablo say he still feel like the son-in-law has something to do with it.
radio silent. What happened? If anything, that said, the FBI has let it out that they have DNA and we believe it's a hair. So how is the analysis different, Tammy Ballard, between, let's just go with a mitochondrial hair analysis versus blood or sweat analysis?
I do want to go one step further on the hair technology with respect to rootless hairs. So yes, the ideal is a nice root for nuclear DNA. Then the next step could be mitochondrial DNA, which is on that maternal line. That would be good to compare to everybody that they already have reference samples for to make sure that it's nobody from Nancy Guthrie's family. But once they do that, if there is sufficient material, they don't just have mitochondrial in their wheelhouse, they can actually sequence it. And that's how they can use that for the genealogy searches. So the technology is advanced beyond.
When you say sequence, you mean, you know what, let me have you explain it. What do you mean by sequence?
The SNP technology, the single nucleotide polymorphism technology that is being utilized for the forensic genetic genealogy testing, that is actually in the wheelhouse for, it's not a lot of laboratories, but some select laboratories that are able to do rootless hairs. So yes, mitochondrial is something that will probably be assessed or possibly be assessed, but there's also this advancement in the technology to be able to utilize sequencing for rootless hairs.
Okay, back to the question, Tammy Ballard. Oh, hold on. Dave Mack, before I get to Tammy Ballard on the difference in the FBI at Quantico analyzing the hair versus sweat or blood that may have been found at the scene. I'm not talking about Nancy Guthrie sweat and blood. I'm talking about the perp sweat and blood, particularly sweat from the bite light.
Everybody
onto
needs to
his
be.
hand and then hand onto surfaces in the home. We understand, well, we all saw, Savannah Guthrie introduced Hollywood star Anne Hathaway. They went to a break, and when we came back, no Savannah Guthrie, she was called off the set. Many speculated she got word of a development in the Nancy Guthrie case. Was it to do with the person detained? Was it some other development? She came back. And what that tells me, Dave Mack, is she was not told that Nancy had been found either dead or alive, or she would have left and been on the next plane out to Tucson. So it's not that. But she did leave the set. So that's another factor to throw into what we're already learning about a potential detainee, not arrest, a detainee detained for questioning in the nighttime hours south of Tucson. What can you tell me about that?
They got a person to.
But Nancy, when you get right down to it, Savannah introduced an upcoming segment with Anne Hathaway, and when viewers came back to the scene, Hoda Kotb was doing the interview. Nothing was said, just Savannah's not there, and it makes this from a network level. The preparation that goes into having a segment like that is pretty intense. So for Savannah to be taken away at that moment, not something they would do lightly. It was obviously to get her information, because they might have been afraid that this information was going to be leaked, and it could be leaked before they were able to get it to her. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. Now, what actually happened with regard to the DNA, the hair, whatever they found, again, investigators being very cagey on what they're telling us. We know that we've got multiple labs involved in bringing back multiple results to the Pima County Sheriff's Department and being able to analyze it with the FBI. So there's a lot of different things coming to play. But what did happen is during the course of the day yesterday, after Savannah walked off the set, we found out that some DNA results have come back, and that investigators are looking at this DNA information.
It's wild, guys.
Hi, guys. Nancy Grace here. Please.
So they got hair in this situation.
I hope to see you there. And thank you, friend.
Tammy Ballard. And in the last hours, as we go to air Tammy Ballard, the Pima County Sheriff, that would be Nanas, puts out the first statement they've put out in weeks and weeks and weeks. It seems like the online sleuths are doing more than the Pima County Sheriffs are doing. But that said, stating that they are cooperating with the FBI. Okay, that's not exactly a bombshell, but could you very simply break it down? If it is a hair, how easy is that to analyze? How long does it take, as opposed to analyzing sweat or blood?
Well, the biggest difference is that the hair, if it has a nice big root, that's going to have some DNA, but obviously not as much as something like blood or sweat potentially. So you're really hoping that you probably have like maybe potentially a one-shot deal with a single hair, if that's what they have. Blood, saliva, sweat, those are items where you could potentially do more types of testing. You could do the traditional testing and maybe also testing for the SNP technology in genetic genealogy. But with a hair, usually it's a one-shot deal. It's a little bit more finesse as far as the actual technical side of it when you're extracting the DNA. But once you move forward with that, they would likely be taking that forward for sequencing if they have enough hair sample available.
As we wait for the latest on a possible detainee overnight, we know this: the FBI ramping up advanced DNA testing as mixed genetic samples point to a possible breakthrough in Nancy Guthrie's kidnap case. Now, straight out to the D4VD case.
No. We won't be going. So we find out that there was a person detained, and they also have a brand new hair sample that they're going to send into labs to be tested, guys. Not only that, they got some a new ransom note that they got a new ransom note too, that basically reads they know where the body of Nancy Guthrie is. Ransom note, I know where her body is. Basically implicating or throwing out there that she may not be alive anymore. Let's go.
Guthrie was reported missing February 1st from her Tucson, Arizona home. Investigators have yet to identify a suspect or a person of interest, and there is still no sign of where Guthrie could be. Let me now bring in our national security contributor to better break down these developments, former CIA officer and FBI special agent Tracy Walder. Tracy, good morning to you, my friend. Thank you for your time early this morning. Do you find the timing of these latest ransom notes to be intentional?
2 new ransom notes, guys. This is crazy.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Marky. Yes, I absolutely find these to be intentional. This is a person that now, for almost, a month, 6 weeks, has waited to essentially put out another note. I think this is a person who sort of wants the fame, wants the discussion, and TMZ is giving them really exactly what they want.
The thing that really sticks out to me with all of these ransom notes, Tracy, is the Bitcoin ask, right? Like this latest one asked for half a Bitcoin.
Now they want a half a Bitcoin to know where the body is.
I mean, the Guthrie family is good and willing to pay $1 million for anybody who has information that helps recover Nancy. If this person were innocent, why not come forward for that
For that
cash,
money.
that $1 million instead, and help crack the case?
You're absolutely right, because as you know, the amount of Bitcoin has changed. I'm not surprised that they are using Bitcoin, Margie, or asking for Bitcoin as it's pseudo-anonymous, right? I think that is unfortunately the way that a lot of kidnappers, ransoms, those kinds of things, we've seen that a lot. So that's not surprising in and of itself, but this is what, $34,000-ish. So the number has changed significantly from when that first ask came in.
And we know
why do they keep on asking for Bitcoins, guys? They said she said it because it's anonymous. But basically, there's been 2 brand new ransom note. One of them saying basically they know where her body is. You got to pay the ransom in half a Bitcoin in order to get the information. But basically, they just throwing out there that she's possibly unalive.
other notes throughout the case have been ruled out as fakes. However, just given the coverage of Guthrie's disappearance, what's the FBI doing to ensure they're accurately authenticating any alleged communication right now?
The FBI doesn't have a choice. They have to treat all of these as real until they are disproven. And so that's a good thing. We want them to do that. But the problem is we don't want a sheer, large number of volume to come through to the point that it stops up the FBI in terms of doing this in an efficient and quick way if they are real to find her. So I think in this case, what they are doing is obviously my guess is this person is using a VPN and is not in the location that they are saying that they are. So they have to get through that. They're probably using encrypted chat to do this if this is the same one as the individual who did that in, I guess, mid-February. So that is going to take some time, but they will be able to discredit or credit the person at some point.
All right, Brian, stay right there. We want to stay, and then also joining us to react, Andrew Black, former special agent in charge of the FBI's Tucson office, and Jonathan Gilliam, former FBI special agent.
More on Nancy Guthrie,
Brian,
guys.
sticking with you for just a second. Why do you think that this source waited until now to speak out about the investigation? We're 2 months into this, which may not seem like a lot of time, but when someone's missing, even the first few hours are crucial to an investigation. So do you have any context as to why this person's deciding now is the best time to get out in front of the camera?
Yeah, I think frustration, again, that it has hit the 61-day mark and the realization, according to the source, that many of the problems they're having now with the investigation.
So we 66 days in, guys.
Go back to the beginning. You always hear the first 48 hours are the most important, and you've got a supervisor that was in charge in the beginning who literally, according to the source, had never even investigated a homicide before.
Andrew, what about that? Of course, people always have their first time to do something, but for a supervisor to be on this case, what I picked up in that interview is when the source says that this was treated as a search and rescue mission, not with any kind of criminality at the beginning, at least. So when you have a supervisor with very limited or no experience, when there's blood on the front steps of this crime scene, seems like there's something missing there.
Yeah, that was.
And I don't think we ever found out who the blood belongs to that was found, guys. A lot of people speculated that it might be Nancy's, but I don't think we ever got like a confirmation that it was.
By Brian getting the source to come forward and share that information of what the source is saying is true. That's very
What's up, Skinny?
Even Sheriff Nanos admitted that there were missteps early on in the investigation. The crime scene was turned over early. Reporters were able to come onto the scene and actually identify the blood droplets and take photographs of that before it had been properly processed. Obviously, on a big case like this, you want someone with experience and who knows how to work this type of case. And at first, that case was handled so sloppily, but you heard them say, basically they was on a search and rescue, not like a unaliving mission or something like that. So that may be why people were able to walk in. It was wrapped up so fast until they got that video of the person outside, basically with the backpack and the mask on. But by then, I would say the crime scene was already contaminated. Possibilities. You just can't focus on one theory as to what happened to Nancy Guthrie. So that this is very concerning.
Jonathan, you had a theory that you believe Nancy Guthrie was taken within 2 hours of her home, just based on the timing of the reporting of her being missing. where the suspect may have been able to drive within 2 hours. Do you still believe that that is something that could be viable, given we have no real public leads, and according to the source, no
Shan, I'm from Texas. Texas in the building.
real information about a suspect or where she may be?
Yeah, sure. I think anything's possible. And I think if it was a burglary gone bad, or if the individual was there to assault her and somehow she got, injured so bad that he'd panicked, or if they were working together, he was working together with somebody else to get her out of there for a purpose of kidnapping, and she got injured. Any of those possibilities, they only had about 2.5 hours before the sun started to come up. And I don't think that most people would want to be out in the open with somebody who, if they knew who she was, somebody who is her daughter's famous. But, I want to say this, Katie. One of the greatest things I got to do when I was in the FBI was go through the NYPD homicide investigator course.
I wonder, well, maybe the fact that her daughter was well known, and had money, maybe that was the reason why she was singled out. Because to myself, I was wondering what would make somebody want to take this old lady and then charge half of Bitcoin in order to get her back. You see what I'm saying? But I kind of understand that maybe it's because of her daughter.
It's a 2-week course that investigators from all over the country come to. And the very first thing they talk about are these issues that you're seeing. Keeping the scene, making sure the scene stays clean, and supervising how things are going, and not getting, in a rut of this is what we believe happened, letting the evidence lead you. It was an amazing course. And it's incredible how I see all these things going wrong with a sheriff's department that should have really experienced homicide investigators working there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of standard practices that were completely thrown out the window. Brian, it's so crazy to think back to that exact thing where the crime scene tape was taken down. It was put back up. It was taken down. I believe it was 4 different times. And of course, the sheriff has justified all of that. In this interview with the source, they said that the sheriff has ruined the department. So of course, Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 2 months, but Tucson is a place that has
they talking bad about that sheriff. I told y'all about the crime scene being contaminated with them letting people, walk through the house, walk on the porch, and all that type of stuff while all of this is going on. So they have that chief has been under pressure.
Crime. And I'm curious what you're hearing about not just the sheriff's department and the deputies and their confidence in their department to be able to search and for other people and to combat crime there, but also what people in the neighborhoods you've been spending time in are thinking.
Yeah, I mean, they're concerned. I think it went from sadness in many ways. There's this big Bring Her Home banner behind me that thousands of people have signed for Nancy Guthrie. And it went from concern now to really frustration. I mean, to think that it has been 61 days and people are upset with the sheriff. I mean, look, there's a recall effort going on. I mean, there's a lot going on here when it comes to the sheriff. I mean, they're trying to literally boot him out of office. The Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to start investigating him. They are claiming that he lied under oath on a different issue about his disciplinary history at his previous job. So he's really coming under fire from all directions. And it seems this Nancy Guthrie investigation really opened up a can.
I told y'all they putting a lot of pressure on the sheriff, guys. They saying he didn't do his job correctly.
Worms.
Andrew, from a federal perspective, the FBI was involved in this case. Is there salvaging here? Is this a cold case at this point?
Well, there is quite a bit of evidence that the FBI is still going through that I'm aware of. There's mixed DNA evidence that they're trying to get a genealogy match for, to develop a suspect. I think the problem initially is this should have been turned over to the FBI initially. They're the leaders in the world in working kidnapping investigations. It was a golden opportunity for Sheriff Nanos just to say, hey, we've got the help of the FBI. We're going to turn over this investigation to them. We will support them. I know the deputy sheriffs on the ground and the agents work very well together. It was a golden opportunity with all the resources the FBI had. They should have been responsible for the communication at press conference. There were missteps early on with Sheriff Nanos handling the press conference. The FBI is trained on how to message properly and how to work these investigations logically. I think that's where the breakdown has come. And now you've seen this cumulative lack of confidence in the sheriff's ability to function properly.
Jonathan, just real quickly, do you agree with that the FBI should have been taking this case from the beginning?
Absolutely. I mean, especially if they know they don't have the experience there. But, you know, the three most deadly policies in law enforcement and most professions is nepotism, favoritism, and DEI. It's destroyed law enforcement in a lot of ways.
And corruption is one of those too. Brian Entin, thank you for bringing us your exclusive reporting. Always amazing. Andrew Black, Jonathan Gilliam, thank you so much for helping break it down.
It's just crazy you can still go missing in 2026, man. I'm just shocked by that alone. I also was shocked by how they was able to pull that video footage up off from a Ring camera that wasn't even active.
A News Nation exclusive on the search for Nancy Guthrie. It's been over 2 months since she went missing, and despite all the national attention, we still have no idea what happened to her or where she might be. And as more time passes, there's more backlash against Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. News Nation just sat down with a source close to the investigation to get a clearer look at how the case was being handled or mishandled from the start. And what we found out truly shocked and saddened us. And it also explains a great deal as to why the effort to bring Nancy home has moved so slowly. We here at News Nation have gone to great lengths to keep the source's identity a secret. They will appear on your screen in shadow, and we've disguised their voice.
Let's
the voice
go.
can be a little hard to listen to, so follow along with the captions on your screen, and trust me, it will be worth it. Here's News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Entin's interview.
Exclusive.
What would you say are the biggest mistakes when it comes to the Nancy Guthrie investigation, from what you know?
Speaking with some people that actually know the intimate knowledge of this investigation have told me that there was an immediate rush to judgment on what was happening at that scene, and it was that Nancy had somehow wandered off. And so they rushed to that judgment, stayed with that judgment, and then ran the investigation as if this was a search and rescue.
Could it have been bad police? That's what they're saying.
From what you know, were the initial people who responded inexperienced?
From what I understand, the people that were there on the scene were not 10-year homicide detectives. They didn't have a lot of experience in homicide at that point, to include the supervisor, who, from my understanding, never investigated homicide before being installed as the supervisor for the homicide unit.
So the supervisor who first responded to Nancy Guthrie's house had never investigated a homicide?
Correct.
How is that possible?
Well, so you have decisions made by people that will install friends and people that can do stuff for them, opposed to people that are there on their merit and can do the job correctly.
Do you think not enough evidence was collected?
The fact that detectives had to return to that location not once but several times leads me to believe that they should have handled it differently. They should have kept the scene secure.
Do you get the sense right now that there's anyone that they're seriously looking at?
The people I've talked to that are still in the know on this investigation tell me that there's no direct suspect right now, no name on the table.
Is that shocking?
Not with how the investigation's gone so far. I mean, you have individuals that are either lucky as hell or more cunning than a lot of people have seen in the past. If you take the first, extremely lucky, maybe his luck will run out, but so far it hasn't. But if you take the second,
So this is supposed to be a person that's working directly on the inside. We're trying to find out who did this to Nancy, guys. He don't want to be on camera. They blacked him out, disguised his voice, but he's most definitely giving some insight. Let's go.
one that was extremely cunning, there's a chance that he may have covered his tracks so well that we may not find out what happened right now.
Obviously, we're hiding your identity right now because you could get in a lot of trouble for speaking out this way. What would you want to say to the sheriff if you could?
I would say that he ruined a great department. It's savable if he steps aside, and I would ask him to step aside.
How would you describe morale at the sheriff's office right now?
I would say right now it's extremely low. This is the lowest I've seen it. There's a lot of embarrassment, especially with the news conversations they've had with Nanos, his interaction with the media.
When the press conferences started happening and the interviews with Nanos, what were you thinking?
Shut your mouth, stop talking. That's pretty much what we were all saying. is why is he out there saying that?
The no
I
confidence.
need everybody in the building to take time to double tap their screen. That's how you hit the like button. It helps out the channel. Or click the 3 dots in the right-hand corner and hit that thumbs up, guys. Either way is appreciated. Let's get the likes past 100 if you don't mind, guys.
Vote. I mean, that every single
subscribe to the channel if you're new.
Voted that they don't have confidence in the sheriff. I think to a lot of outsiders was like, wow. I mean, every single deputy.
Yeah, this isn't the first no confidence vote that we've done. So it should have been no surprise to him, especially with what's been going on. So not only our local community, Arizona in general, but just the nation now sees that we have no faith in Chris Nanos.
Is it awkward for people working there?
I think everyone is walking on eggshells.
What would people in the department want to say to Savannah?
Just to explain to Savannah that just because we have an incompetent lead doesn't mean that we don't care, that we don't want Nancy to be brought home safely, and that we're not with her in this. We are completely with her and her family on this.
Incredible. Brian Enton joins us live from Tucson with more on his exclusive
So that was from an insider, guys, of the Nancy Guthrie case. Basically, you know, speaking on what's taking place.
Brian.
Yeah, Katie. I mean, you think about how unusual it is for someone close to an investigation to speak out this way, but it shows really how desperate they are for people to know what's been going on behind the scenes, the embarrassment that people feel on the inside, and just wanting to get the word out that they do support Savannah and they're working as hard as they can, but that these mistakes early on in the investigation really caused problems. We tried to reach out to Sheriff Nanos to get a comment on all of this, Katie. We have not gotten a response. He's not granted us an interview since the beginning. We had an interview very early on in the investigation, but in the past he has stood by his decisions and stood by the people who he has chosen to investigate Nancy Guthrie's disappearance.
I want to talk about it. I want to bring in Cheryl McCollum, an active crime scene investigator in Metro Atlanta, who's worked on high-profile cases from Tupac Shakur to the Zodiac Killer. She's also the author of Swans Don't Swim in a Sewer, great title. John Bueller, retired detective who famously investigated the disappearance of Lacey Peterson. It's great to have you both here. Cheryl, I'll start with you. You know, Brian's source says that this supervisor had no homicide experience, okay? You make the point, as far as I understand, hasn't still been declared a homicide. Totally fair. I would just follow up and say those first 48 hours, you and I both know are crucial. We're also talking about a kidnapping. We're also talking about an elderly victim. It seems the argument was that this was interpreted wrong. This was interpreted as a wandering off situation initially. It was a bad working theory. Isn't that the problem?
Jesse, you and I have talked, and I have been very clear that this thing should have been workday homicide from jump. And if the evidence pulls you in another direction, that she just wandered off or it was a medical event, fine. You've done no harm. There's no doubt this should have been worked differently. However, again, no one, not the sheriff's department, not the FBI, has yet declared this a homicide. So my point of saying that is this. What is the background of the lead detective? Is it missing persons? Is it burglary? They're not concentrating on what gifts this person may have and what they may bring to the table. And I would also argue that if you've ever watched the first 48, or if you've ever been lucky enough to go to NYPD's homicide school, they teach this team atmosphere. Everybody rotates. And when you rotate, everybody will do a sketch. Everybody will canvass. Everybody will locate witnesses or run tags. Everybody does every job. That lead person, they are not going to let them fail. There's a lot of talent in that department, I promise you.
Now, John, I'll go to you. You clearly, first of all, do not have as good a background as Cheryl. I mean, my gosh, she's like at the gun range right there. It's incredible. I didn't even notice it when I was introducing. I see it there. But John, let me ask you, how problematic is this? Again, if we take this as true, that this source is talking about what happened in the first stages of this investigation, is this really a wrench? Does this really seem to be why we don't seemingly have an answer at this point in time?
Well, based on the limited amount of information that they've given us so far, Jesse, it seems likely that that is the problem. And you can't really draw conclusions in a solid nature based on that. However, anytime you have a situation like this, you've got a high-risk victim, 84 years old, in relatively poor health. Where would you come up and pull this out of your ear that she went out wandering at night? It's so dark up there. It's hilly. The terrain is uneven. I just don't understand how you could even come up with that unless you're looking to maybe make this something less than it is. But a high-risk victim like this, you got to look at it. Just like Cheryl said, you started working it as a homicide. You never have any regrets doing it that way, because the evidence that you miss, that you don't collect if you don't work it like a murder from the beginning, is the stuff that you need when you go into court to try and get a conviction on the guy when you eventually find him.
I mean, Cheryl, I go back to what that source had seemingly suggested. It seems like it's one of two things. Either the suspect or suspects, master criminal, so cunning, can't be detected, leaving no evidence, or there were mistakes that allowed this person or persons to take advantage of, and why we are now 62 days out and seemingly no reported, no seeming suspect.
Or they're working so well behind the scenes, they're just this close to making an arrest. The problem is the lack of communication. And I am telling you, when you've got a sheriff that now won't talk to anybody, the FBI has gone radio silent, it feeds this white noise. Now we're talking about the morale of the sheriff's department. We're talking about, you got a lead detective that's inept. That should have been shut down by the people that are running this investigation. And I mean from the top. I would like to see this joint press conference that has yet to happen.
Yeah.
You don't have the sheriff and the FBI and this family on the same stage yet. And that is why this kind of thing is being fed. But I'm going to talk like I'm a part of the Guthrie family. When it comes to the morale, when it comes to who's leading this and the dirty laundry and the infighting,
sure,
I don't care about any of it.
Yep.
Go find their mama.
Here with us now is former Pima County Sheriff Richard Carmona and former FBI agent and News Nation law and justice contributor Jennifer Coffindaffer. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Let's get right into those new comments made by an anonymous source inside the investigation. They spoke to our Brian Enton. They said police were not even looking at this as a criminal matter. I want to play a short part of it.
What would you say are the biggest mistakes when it comes to the Nancy Guthrie investigation, from what you know?
Speaking with
That's that insider again. Just playing a little clip. But it's crazy. At the beginning, they thought she just wandered off, which is something that's I would see as normal, them not knowing exactly what's going on. But they saying that was a bad thing because they should have went in like it was something else instead of just a missing person. Should have just went in like with all the precautions.
There was an immediate rush to judgment on what was happening at that scene, and it was that Nancy had somehow wandered off. And so they rushed to that judgment, stayed with that judgment, and then ran the investigation as if this was a search and rescue issue, opposed to a possible criminal issue.
So, Richard, I will start with you. What's your reaction to hearing that they thought Nancy simply walked away and did not start looking at this as a criminal matter until a few days later?
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me with you. The fact, again, I want to be clear that I was not part of the investigation, spent decades with the department previously. So the allegation is troubling. I know that there were a number of challenges to start with from my colleagues who were in the investigation, that there were many young detectives. There were not enough senior people there. There was not a good relationship with the FBI.
We get 9 more y'all on that like button, guys. 9 more likes. Double tap that screen and click the 3 dots, hit that thumbs up, guys. We're getting the latest and breaking on the Nancy Guthrie situation, man. Most definitely like the video. Double tap your screen if you're on a mobile device, or click those 3 dots, hit that thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you're new, man.
But this particular sheriff did not want to work with them. So I see a number of challenges that were put before us, even though I want to speak also that the detectives I know and the leaders that still are within the department are exceptional people. But from the very top, the leadership was lacking, as you all saw nationally on TV and local TV when the sheriff spoke. It was very disappointing and embarrassing to all of us in law enforcement.
And we always know the first 48 hours are crucial to any investigation. Jennifer, if police went off that theory, how could the investigation have been impacted?
Well, I will say, first of all, that about 125,000 elderly walk away from their houses and are investigated every year. So that is typical. This is extremely atypical that you would have a kidnapping situation. But you look at the fact the Ring cameras pulled off, the doors are open, there's blood all going out of the house. I mean, these were obvious clues that this wasn't somebody just walking away. And the impact, as you asked, the impact is grave because you are missing crucial minutes and hours right after this occurred to find that person in that area. And so it was, you can never get the first 48 back.
Richard, that same source that spoke to Brian Enton said the majority of investigators assigned to that case did not have experience in homicide cases. We were here in the newsroom, we were talking about that. Is that very uncommon, especially for a small, some would say sleepy town like Pima County or in Pima County?
Well, I'd say that Pima County is not a small, sleepy area. It's actually pretty busy. We're along the national border, the international border with Mexico.
That's a good point.
So it is. But to your point, what I was told by the investigators, that there were many young investigators there. There was not a lot of experience. A lot of the senior officers left the department when Anos became the sheriff because they had no confidence in his leadership.
Jennifer, from your experience as an FBI special agent, what would have been your first reaction if you were called to assist in this case, knowing the local police were seemingly in over their heads?
I mean, the first move is to secure that crime scene. I would have established a way to get in and out for those who had to get in and out. I would have absolutely redone the crime scene to include the roof, to include the septic tank on that.
Why would you send unexperienced officers to the scene, guys? No homicide experience. That's crazy.
Mission again.
But hey, man, they've been saying this case got a lot of holes from the beginning.
And I also would have started a canvas that spanned out further and also grabbed those cameras that would have involved traffic cameras. There was a school that there's a circuitous route that could have been taken. I would get all this camera footage within that time frame and have the analysts on top of that right after I took over.
Tomorrow marks 9 weeks since Nancy Guthrie went missing. Still no concrete information about a suspect. There was
Shout out to Miss Mo for that plan. Thank you.
They were either really, really, really pros or really, really, really lucky so far. And I think it's a mixture of the two right now. I think you got to have some facet of experience and training to carry out something like this and be successful for 2 months.
I'm going to pose this question to both of you. I'm running out of time, but it's an important question. Is it luck or skill that whomever did this is still on the run, Richard?
Well, I don't know that's the right way to characterize it, to tell you the truth. It's an unusual case. It starts out in the beginning that you have to ask the question, did this person just walk away? Is it an elderly person that walked away, which, as the FBI agent had said, is a common thing. But then it expands when you find out that was unlikely, when you start seeing evidence like blood in the back of the house, things like that, that now this looks more like criminal. But then you look for motive. Why would somebody kidnap an 84-year-old lady who's infirm? And so that's where the investigation starts. I think that the challenge was at the very top. I think the department has a great record and history of being good investigators and a great department working collaboratively with FBI and other agencies. But the challenge was at the top. The challenge was from the sheriff that didn't provide the leadership that was necessary.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation.
All right. So we most definitely keep hearing about this hair. That was sent to the lab, guys. But they also had a former FBI agent, who basically spoke on this situation and how he feels that this case will potentially be solved. Let's check this out. Continue to work on that like button by double tapping your screen or clicking the 3 dots and hitting that thumbs up as we find out everything it is to know about the recent developments in the Nancy Guthrie case, guys. Y'all know it's a lot of conspiracies going around, people feeling like her family was involved, with this entire situation, basically focusing in on the son-in-law. I don't know how true that is, but hey, that's what they say.
Has stretched into its 2nd month. The mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie went missing from her Tucson home over 60 days ago. Authorities know that her doorbell camera was disconnected in the early hours of February 1st, and 41 minutes later, her pacemaker app was disconnected from her phone. 10 days into her disappearance, authorities seemed to catch a break when recovered Google Nest footage showed an armed and masked suspect outside of her door the morning of her disappearance, appearing to tamper with the doorbell camera. But over 60 days since Nancy Guthrie disappeared, she still hasn't been found, and no suspects have been published.
Over 60 days. How do you just go missing in America in 2026 and nobody can find you?
Named. Dr. Raymond Carr, a former FBI special agent, joins Forbes True Crime to discuss the status of the case. Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, the host of Forbes True Crime. Joining me now is Dr. Ray Carr, a retired FBI special agent. Dr. Carr, thank you so much for joining me.
Having me, Brittany. Appreciate it.
I want to talk about where we are right now in the case of Nancy Guthrie. She's the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. She's been missing now for over 60 days. And despite there being a real national spotlight on this case, even President Trump weighing in and the Guthrie family offering $1 million reward, her whereabouts are still unknown. And we will get into the latest in the investigation. But as we sit here right now, over 2 months in, what do you make of where the case is at?
Well, like you said, 2 months in, the case has kind of transitioned into what I would call a precision.
The retired FBI agent, guys, basically saying how he feels that the Nancy Guthrie case will be solved.
Phase investigation.
What they did wrong, what they got right,
and
and what
the
they
urgency
need
is
to
still
do
there.
better.
But the work becomes more analytical. It's focused on digital evidence, behavioral patterns, and tightening the circle around who had access, motive, and opportunity.
Let's say, going in with that perspective, you were put on this case, you're back, you're an FBI special agent here who is working on this. What would be your first move?
Well, first of all, you say there's no direct suspect. That's often misunderstood. It usually means investigators don't have someone who legally meets the threshold for charges. Not that they don't have a strong theories or persons of interest. In fact, this is often when cases are close to breaking. When you look at this, if I'm coming into this case, I have to go back and I have to look at every single thing that they've done. Now, early on, my co-host on Cold Red put out a profile on who or the type of offenders are, and then we put out a statement to the offenders themselves, both Jim Fitzgerald. We were both profilers with the FBI. So I would look, from my perspective, I would re-interview every single witness, because some of the questions that they asked, I might have different questions. I may see something that someone else didn't. That's always what happens. I mean, when you look at cold cases, not that this is cold, but you would take it as a situation. The first 24 to 48 hours is when everything is the freshest. And once that kind of dissipates, then it becomes, you get further and further away from where you need to be.
To your point about the cold case, the Pima County Sheriff, Chris Nanos, he said at the end of March, this is not even close to a cold case. As I mentioned, or alluded to rather, a few moments ago, News Nation's Brian Enton, he's been on the ground there in Tucson. He reported that law enforcement said they had no direct suspect right now and that there's no name on the table. But you think that that means something differently. You said that this isn't a cold case. What is this? What do you think the breakthrough could be as of right now?
The key isn't all these leads coming in and all these tips that are coming in. The key is finding the right tip that's going to solve the case. I don't necessarily agree with the sheriff. I mean, yeah, there's people that are actively investigating this case, but you have to remember, and the whole thing here is, I want your audience to understand, I believe the FBI is going to solve this case, and the people. And
he believes the FBI is going to solve it.
I really do.
Man,
What
it's
they
been
know,
60-some days now.
And I'm going to tell you this from my experience being an agent, absolutely a small thumbtack of what the Bureau and law enforcement knows. And they hold that back for a reason. Go back to the Idaho murders. And I knew guys that were closely involved in that case because it was out of the Philadelphia division. And when you look at those individuals, when they were following this individual around for 3 weeks before they told the media. And they told the media when they were about to arrest him. The media had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. And we don't have any idea now. But I'm telling you right now, the men and women of the FBI and law enforcement are doing a bang-up job here, and they're doing everything they possibly can.
I know you think that this is going to get solved. You think they just need to find that right tip. TMZ said on Monday they received a tip. They received multiple ransom notes from a person who's said
one of them in which said, "I know where her body is."
Ransom notes before. This person has demanded Bitcoin. And this was on the same day that Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show anchor desk. TMZ alleged that the notes, like I said, demanded Bitcoin, and they would then deliver those involved on a silver platter. That's what the note said. They also expressed frustration that the FBI wasn't taking them seriously. They had nothing to do with the kidnapping, but they said that Nancy Guthrie is no longer alive, but they did see her, and she was alive and in Mexico at one point. What do you make of all that? Do you think that that is credible information there?
The fact that the ransom note was sent to a media outlet like TMZ rather than the FBI or law enforcement, to me, is a major red flag. Legitimate kidnappers control the communication tightly. They avoid unnecessary exposure. And to have this done on the same day that Savannah Guthrie goes back on the Today Show, is that a coincidence or was that planned? You know, this behavior by the individuals that sent this note, it suggests one of three possibilities to me. It's either a hoax or an opportunistic actor. It's someone that's trying to insert themselves in the case, kind of like attention.
It's not you talking about the ransom note potentially being a hoax. Because I don't think this situation with Nancy is a hoax. I just think they may be investigating in the wrong places. Maybe they should look into the family. It's just something about this case that don't sit right with me.
Seeking, or the offender, again, is trying to manipulate the narrative or create confusion. Because maybe, and we don't know, the investigators are getting close. But I could tell you what I would do with this document. I would look for linguistic patterns. I would look for metadata and transmission routes and consistency, if there is any, with any of the earlier communications. You know, real kidnappers seek money, and fake ones seek attention.
One of the things we learned in the Today Show interview with Savannah Guthrie is that she thought most of those ransom notes were fake, but two of them that she responded to, she thought were real. And then her brother, it's her older brother, he had a career in the military and intelligence. Apparently, Savannah said that he thought their mother could have been kidnapped for ransom. And then Savannah apparently asked, because of me, and he said, yeah, I'm sorry, but yes. So what do you think here? A, do you think those ransom notes had merit? And B, do you agree with Savannah's brother that the mother could have been kidnapped for ransom?
Well, first of all, I thought if her brother said that, I thought that was cold to say that to Savannah. I mean, not at this, you may think that, and keep that to yourself. But the thing that kind of stood out to me, and I know it's only one data point, there's two parts to your question here. Number one, I don't know what ransom notes she was referring to. There's been several notes that have come into TMZ and into Savannah's family. So I don't know which ones are without having seen the notes. But the thing that stood out in that interview was when she said, the first thing she said about her brother was that he called it a kidnapping. I went, how does he know that? That's my first question. What did he see? What did he hear that led him to that conclusion? I mean, the police in the beginning thought she was a walkaway, and he thinks it's a kidnapping. There's a big difference there. Why does he see one thing and the police are seeing something different? And I think the police, I know there was a huge gap in experience of the Pima County Sheriff's Office working cases like this, and I think that's maybe would lead to their theory, but I don't know what led to his theory. He might have to explain that. And the other thing, in all fairness, you know, that may be Savannah's words. It may not be her brother's words.
These were things that were on the ransom note. Basically, there was a new location claims. The sender claimed to have seen Nancy alive in Sonora, Mexico, but simultaneously asserted that she is unalive now. This is what the ransom note said, guys, in this case. They also lowered the demand. Instead of millions, the sender requested 1 Bitcoin, approximately $70,000, to identify the kidnappers and the location of her body, guys. Yeah. Little break. This is what was contained inside of the ransom note, guys. It's crazy.
Her brother may be saying, "Hey, look, somebody took her," which is an easy way of saying it's a kidnapping. But you know, I'm cautious about that. But I just wondered, what did he see? What led him to that conclusion?
I know in that interview, Savannah said essentially on a good day, her mother could make it to the mailbox and back because it was painful for her to walk. She also noted that the back doors were open. What did that indicate to you?
A lot of people thought that that may have been an exit for the kidnappers. And they went out into the field, and there was a SWAT commander. I heard a tape on him, and he says, you know, it's very hard to navigate that terrain even during the day. To do it at night without any light is even more difficult. I don't think the back doors were the exit. I thought they were the entry point. And I believe that they exited, as did the SWAT commander, from the front door based upon the evidence that's presented and the evidence that I'm aware of. And that's the blood stains that were noticed on the stoop outside the front door. There's a lot of blood, not a lot of blood, but there was droplets of blood, which tells me that there was some violence that occurred inside the home with her. I don't know if she's on heart medication. I don't know the types of medication she's on, or does she bleed easier than most? You know how sometimes you're on blood thinners, and if you get cut, blood kind of comes out pretty quickly from someone like that.
Based on all of the evidence right now that's publicly available in this case, also paired with your experience as a former FBI agent, what do you think? Who do you think the perpetrator is here? Do you think that this kidnapping was done by a...
This is what basically the FBI is speculating. Former FBI agents have noted that timing is a red flag, suggesting these newer notes may be from opportunists targeting the family as they re-entered the public eye, guys. That's what they saying, basically about the newfound ransom notes in the Nancy Guthrie case, man. They lowered their demand. They went from what they were asking at first to $70,000, and they basically allured to the fact of Miss Guthrie not being here anymore. But the FBI seems to think that these notes may not be authentic, and basically like a copycat ransom is where we're at right now with this case. What's up, Mo?
A career criminal, a group of professionals, something like that? Or do you think this was done by more of an amateur or someone who got a little bit in over their head?
I think it's a little bit of a mixture of both. I thought there was some organization on part of the offenders, but I thought there was some disorganization as well. And when you look at this statistically, the longer a case goes without contact or recovery, the more concerning the outcome becomes. However, 2 months is not really unusual for cases like this. I mean, there was planning that was involved. We saw that with the removal of the camera. There was cross jurisdictions. There's some information that she may be in Mexico or seen in Mexico. And they had very limited forensic evidence early on. But I think right now, if you asked me earlier, I would be rebuilding the timeline minute by minute on this case. I would start re-examining initial assumptions, and I would be leveraging my ability to conduct a behavior analysis and offender profiling on these individuals. You know, time doesn't kill cases like this. Bad assumptions do. You got to be careful that people make those bad assumptions.
This is just such a heartbreaking case. I mean, not having answers, knowing a loved one is missing, especially an older loved one who has some health issues. And in the interview, Savannah said, how can someone vanish without a trace? Someone knows something, even if that something is someone's been acting strange for the last 7-8 weeks. Typically, in your experience, if someone hasn't said something by now, what would compel them to say something in the future?
Well, apparently it's not money. You know, I don't know why. It's $1 million. I know Savannah's family wanted to put that money out right in the beginning, $1 million. And they were against that because they thought it would create too much information coming in, which is, to me, is never a problem. You can never have enough information. But I can't say for sure. I think if someone knew something right now, I think they would be, you know what? They may have already talked to law enforcement that we don't even know. There's so many unknowns for us on this side of the road that we don't know. But there's probably something out there that we don't know. They may be circling the wagons on someone as we're speaking. We don't know that. But what would cause someone to come out? Well, if they have knowledge, some of these individuals that have done this, and I always found that eventually, depending on how many people are involved here, and I know it's more than one, I'm almost positive it's more than one, you know, because I don't think.
He say he believes there's more than one. So that guy that we see on the porch with the mask on may not be the only one. You know, this former FBI agent says he feels like it's more than one person involved in this Nancy Guthrie situation.
It would be easier to move her. And you have to remember, I don't know what her weight was, but I'm going to estimate around.
He also said he believes that the suspects entered through the back and left out through the front.
140, 150. Imagine picking up a sandbag that weighs 150 pounds. It's very, very difficult. You'd almost have to drag somebody. So I think there's a few people that were involved in this. And then to be able to move her, wherever she was, in the back of the car, in the trunk of the car, I have no idea. And the terrain, the neighborhood, all led to these individuals to be able to hide in plain sight, as you might say, because, you know, it's not like you're like where I grew up in the middle of the city, where they say, you know, it takes a neighborhood to raise a child, and everybody knows what everybody does. Here, nobody knew what anybody did. Nobody paid attention to their neighbors, and I think that's part of the problem.
And it feels like the terrain especially is playing such a factor in this story. And the fact that it's just such vast desert, and then that terrain with the cacti and other things, it would just make it almost impossible to find someone. It feels like a needle in a haystack situation here. But when I've talked to other former members of law enforcement, they've told me before that sometimes in a case when it's not solved right away, the answer is always in the notes or the files or anything, the evidence gathered. They just need either a fresh set of eyes or they need to look at it a new way. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's the case here?
Yeah, investigations don't stall, they narrow. And when you look at behavior tells you almost as much as forensic evidence. I mean, I can't tell you how many scenes we've done and looked at where behavior has played a major part in this. The question isn't what we see, it's what doesn't fit. You know, what doesn't fit? What's wrong here? Offenders make mistakes, remember that. They always do. And investigators are kind of just waiting for them to do that. So.
All right, so from the former FBI agent, because I'm tired of listening to him, he basically thinks that they need to take their focus, you know, more on the things that we don't potentially see when it comes to this situation with Aaron Guthrie. Here goes another breakdown of some of the breakdowns of some of the things that have happened within this case.
It's been 75 days since Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, and tonight we're learning that
she said these other places saying 61 and 65. She said it's been 71 days that this lady has been missing. How many of y'all out there think that she's still alive, guys? With this amount of time that's done passed, it's most definitely possible for Nancy to be gone, seeing that she was already suffering from like complications already. You know, she had to take medicine, things of that nature. And she's been missing for 71 days.
DNA evidence found at Nancy's home is just now being sent to an FBI lab 2 months after the feds requested it. We're told the evidence includes hairs found in the house, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department initially sent the evidence to a private lab in Florida, and they were quick to downplay today's news about it finally being turned over to the FBI for analysis. So what was the holdup on this? Joining me now is former FBI Special Agent Jonathan Gilliam. Jonathan, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. So again, the question is, why is it that now 2 months later, this DNA is finally going to the FBI lab? Why was this analysis not done earlier?
Well, I can only speculate on the exact reason, but if we go off the totality of what we've seen, Katie, I would say that it was because the Sheriff's Department, who's been the lead in this investigation, either was trying to get that to their lab, stored it, or perhaps they didn't even have it. I don't know. They say they had it before, but there's several different reasons why this could have happened. But I think it's better to look at the fact of should it have happened, and no, it should have been shared with the FBI lab to begin with, and then we wouldn't even be talking about this now. We'd literally be several months ahead of the game.
So the Pima County Sheriff's Department has maintained that their lab is just as good as the FBI lab. Like we said, this is happening 2 months after this evidence was allegedly collected. But as you know, Jonathan, in these investigations, time is of the essence. So what does it mean now that 2 months later, we're only hearing about it going to an FBI lab? I mean, is the case has moved along here in a way that is negative, not positive?
Well, you got to realize that, okay, so maybe that lab is incredible at doing DNA, and I've heard some good things about that lab, but the Sheriff's Department is not on the scale of the FBI. The FBI has the ability to reach out to many more databases, many more law enforcement agencies. They have many more sources all over the world that they can query. So the reality is the Sheriff's Department can get the DNA processed. It may not be as processed as fast, but it's what comes after that. How quickly can that Sheriff's Department react and work on that DNA and developing it into real evidence? And that's where the FBI excels exponentially beyond a local police department. I mean, there are police departments like the LAPD or NYPD for sure that have the ability to spread far and wide throughout sources and things like that. But the FBI they have the ability to, it's after the evidence is collected, to move quickly and source all types of intelligence to see if it fits anywhere.
So Jonathan, what about this type of evidence that we're talking about? Hair here, hair DNA from multiple people was found at the scene. That doesn't mean anybody necessarily was a suspect. People go in and out of homes all the time. But does the presence of hair specifically make it easier to isolate a suspect, especially if it's pinged against a broader database like one the FBI has?
Well, for sure, if that hair is belonging to somebody who is related to Nancy, if it's Nancy's hair, I think then you can kind of set that evidence to the side most likely. But, and it also depends on where that hair was found. Was it found in the blood? Was it found somewhere where something had been moved inside? Because they said at the beginning of this that they knew that it was a bad circumstance, that it was probably a criminal act. So was that hair found somewhere intertwined or on the top of that versus under it? And so if it was a family member, now you got a problem there. But if it's not identifiable to anybody related to that house, then the evidence kind of starts leading you down a road where the potential, especially for familia DNA, which you've had Cece on here before talking about that, I think it's just a matter of time if they are connected to someone where they can find that.
Well, every piece hopefully will get to some kind of conclusion for information, because we're months into this thing now and still feel like there's nothing.
71
Jonathan
days.
Gilliam, thank you for joining us. Great to hear from you always.
71 days in.
Thank you.
You know what I'm saying? When it comes to Nancy.
All right. Well, a staffer for the Department of Homeland Security.
71 days in, guys. I just don't feel like, you know what I'm saying? It's just crazy how she just still missing 71 days in. It just don't make sense, y'all. Just don't make sense.
Break in the Nancy Guthrie case, hoping for something, anything that could finally answer the question we've all been asking. Just who allegedly kidnapped Savannah Guthrie's 84-year-old mother from her home in the middle of the night? Today, we have learned we may be getting closer to an answer. Why do I say that? Because sources now tell News Nation's Brian Enton that some DNA evidence from Nancy Guthrie's home, including hairs, have been sent to the FBI's lab for advanced analysis. What does that mean? Well, this could be a major development in the case. You may remember there was some controversy when previous DNA evidence was tested through a Florida crime lab that was used by the Pima County Sheriff's Office and not the FBI's crime lab at Quantico. Those samples didn't apparently match anything in CODIS. It's the FBI's DNA database. And authorities said there was some DNA evidence that was mixed with that of another individual and that it could take a year to fully analyze. So the hope is that the FBI's expertise may glean some new information that could put the suspect behind bars. That's the best case scenario. And the Pima County Sheriff's Office responded to Enton's reporting in a social media post today saying PCSD has worked with the FBI since the beginning of the Guthrie investigation. This is not new information. The private lab we utilize in Florida continues to share information with the FBI lab and other partner labs across the country. DNA analysis remains ongoing. I think a fair argument could be, does that seem a little defensive? Now, it would be understandable considering the department and its sheriff, Chris Nanos, have been taking heavy criticism over their handling of the case for weeks now. So does this news mean we are closer to a breakthrough on the case? Well, joining me now for a closer look is the former director of the Idaho Innocence Project and DNA expert, Greg Hampikian. Greg, great to see you. Thanks for taking the time. What can the FBI lab do?
So now we have a DNA expert.
Well, the FBI lab and a few of the private labs in the country as well can sequence every single base or just about in the human genome, and that's 3 billion bases. Whereas DNA Labs International does do something like that, but they're looking at far fewer sites, maybe a few 100,000 sites instead of millions and millions when we do deep sequencing. So that could be what's going on. We don't really know. It could be that DNA Labs International did a great job, sent them the data, and now the FBI.
I hope it turns up something.
A team of genealogists out there trying to deal with genealogical data.
Should it have been sent to the FBI first, though?
I mean, it would have probably saved a little time. We now know, but we didn't know that at the beginning. I don't think it was a terrible decision, but this is the right way to go at this point because they're going to have to do something extraordinary, obviously. If it is a hair, or if a hair is part of the evidence, that's really exciting because just a few years ago, a good friend of mine, Dr. Ed Green, developed the best technique for taking broken pieces of hair, no root. We used to say if there was no root, it was no good. But just small pieces of hair. I did a case with just a pubic hair on left on a 9-year-old child from 40 years ago. He was able to get sequence information with enough detail that we could do genealogy.
So they saying they don't need the root anymore, guys. They can basically send it through whatever they do and be able to come up with DNA, a suspect, without having the root, just from a piece of hair, not containing the root.
And that
may be what they're doing with this hair that they found at Nancy Guthrie's house that Nancy Grace believes was in the bedroom.
The first rootless hair case.
Creating like a family tree that you narrow down to somebody. So you're saying, just if I'm understanding, hair particles, hair material can actually be quite accurate. The DNA you can extract from is quite accurate. I guess the other concern is, besides who does the hair belong to? If it's not somebody that's supposed to be, if it's somebody who's in the house or is expected in the house, that would be a dead end. But if it's a complete stranger,
yes,
is there a concern that the DNA evidence potentially on the hair could have been contaminated or degraded in any way?
Well, you bring up a good point, and actually hair is advantageous in this way because unlike a blood spot or a semen stain, you can't clean those things. But hair, if it is contaminated, it's on the outside. The DNA doesn't get into the hair. The DNA is kind of baked into the protein of the hair. And so we clean it with a little alcohol, a little bit of weak bleach solution, and hairs aren't contaminated generally. It's usually one person's profile. So that's a nice part of hair. Another problem with hair, as you pointed out, is, we all know what a vacuum bag looks like. And I remember crime scenes, from the 1980s and 90s, I'd get vacuum bags of hair sometime to look at. There's a lot of hair in a house. So if the hair is in a probative place, like, if it were on a victim, say, or associated with a weapon, it's really important. But if it's just a stray hair that they found, we'll see what we get. They're obviously working this really hard. They got the best people now handling the DNA. It should go forward quickly. But does it mean anything?
Well, you say quickly, depending upon what this evidence is and the testing they do. When would they get an answer? Like if you put it into CODIS or you try to, I don't know, genetic genealogy sounds like it would take a lot more time because you have to build it out.
Yeah, I mean, the genealogy is, kind of an endless potential challenge. If you think about the people on the Mayflower now have between 3 million and 35 million descendants. So if they get a hit, if the genealogists get a hit to a couple of family trees or a single family tree, they may have to investigate hundreds or thousands of potential people to how good that hair data is. And that's exhausting, and it takes a lot of people to work a case like that.
Well, listen, this is a development. This is seemingly a positive development in the right direction. Yeah. Hopefully they get answers sooner rather than later. Greg, thanks for taking the time. Always appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, up next, breaking news. Right now, there is an active nationwide warrant.
Yeah, we ain't, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, guys, it's crazy in the Nancy Guthrie situation, man. Also in the David situation. Make sure you take time to double tap that screen. If you have not, that's how you hit the like button, guys, by double tapping that screen. But it's a lot going on within the Nancy Guthrie situation as well as the David situation. David has been arrested, but he's basically detained, no indictment. When it comes to his case, he has no indictment as of yet, just being arrested on suspicion of committing an M, which we know what the M, the murder, you know what I'm saying? And then we have Nancy Guthrie, who's been missing for at least 71 days, guys. And they just they just sent off to the lab for testing a piece of hair that they found at her residence. Nancy Grace believes it was in the bedroom. I think both of these cases are very crazy. And when it comes to David, I don't know how he was able to beat arrest for so long. He was out for like 7 months, and everybody thinking it was him from the get-go. But I'm willing to bet that this guy you see on your left, his best friend, besides Celeste over there to the left with the chain on his black shirt, I'm willing to bet that he told the cops everything they need to know about the situation. Once they got him in for questioning and started pressing him, I'm pretty sure he told everything that he knew, Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, man. You know what I'm saying? If you're not subscribed, subscribe to this channel. Also hit that like button, man. I brought y'all all the updates when it comes to this situation, man. And yeah, both are crazy, man. So until I see y'all again, man, y'all be safe, be blessed out there. We're gonna exit with David's song, Romantic Homicide. Yeah, I think that guy is guilty as heck. I think he guilty. Yeah, that was weird. But yeah, I think that was his confession right there. You know what I'm saying? Police, take that, do what you need to do. Lock this guy up forever, man. I think he did it. I'm just saying. Yeah, but I'm gone, y'all. Y'all make sure y'all double tap that screen. Subscribe if you're new. Turn your notification bell on to all, because you don't want to miss anything when everything news goes live. Shout out to y'all. I'm gone.